Part 19 of The Fates of the Princes of Dyfed by Kenneth Morris. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The story of Rhianon and Pryderi, the second branch of it called The Three Unusual Arts of Rhianon and Gwrygwallt and the Freeing of the Birds of Rhianon. 2. The Art of Peace in the Midst of War and the Freeing of Aden-Lonach. The well was hidden from him when he came there, as it had been at his first coming, and again in the morning when he rode forth to seek the freeing of Aden-Lonach. He took the feather from between the wind-driver's ears and cast it on the air. It drifted a little on the wind and then fell. Where it lighted, the ground began to glimmer, silken and shadowy around it, and he beheld the Well of Wonder, and the hills on all sides, plumed and luminous. Beyond the water, a dark, beautiful radiance, stood the immortal maiden, but she had little kindliness or favour in her aspect at that time. "Greeting of the god and the man to you, courteously," said he.
"And you also. Wherefore come you?"
"Aden-Lonach is free," said Gwrygwallt.
"Yes, she is free," said Tubai, "but it was Pryderi fab Pwyll that freed her."
Gwri marvelled. "If it please you," said he, "give me news of this king's son."
"He was stolen in the night out of his cradle before he was a day old," said she. "The one that stole him stole the three birds also, and it was decreed that no one should free them unless Pryderi freed them when he should have grown up to be a man. From the time of the stealing until now, sorrow and doing penance and a mournful fate have been upon my kinswoman, his mother."
Gwri marvelled again.
"For what reason do you marvel?" said Tubai of the Fountain.
"For this reason," he said. "During all these years it has not been given to Pryderi to find Aden-Lonach, although it was fated that he should find her at last. But now that another has gone upon the quest, he has freed her. Considering I was, whether it would not be better for me to go in quest of Aden-Lonach also, if it were permitted to me."
"There is no saying that it might not be better," said she, "and therefore it will be permitted to you. This feather from her breast will be granted to you for a guide. Set you it upon the wind in the morning, and go forward following it. And it will be permitted to you also to take water in your horn from the fountain, for the sake of vision when it may be required, and for putting excellence in tools. Beyond that, there will be these counsels for you, given freely. Go not forth warlikely, and forsake not peace out of desire for strife, nor quietness where there may be blustering, for it is the nature of Aden-Lonach to abhor senseless tumult. Her singing is a coolness upon all aching, and the passing of desire into peace. And neglect not this labour if you desire to requite me, even though there will be no success for you in it, and no obtaining reward for anyone but Pryderi."
"Evil upon me if I neglect it," said he. Before the words were out on the air, she was made one again with the beauty and glamour of the evening. In the morning he set the feather on the wind, and rode forward following it. It might have been the mere feather of a wood-pigeon when he loosed it, but blowing forward it took on more magical aspect, and glistened in the sunlight, and glowed dimly where there was shadow. By mountain pass and clovered valley, by meadow-sweet mead and wood anemone hedgerow, it drifted and eddied glimmering before him. At noon he passed Caerhun, but the feather neither paused nor turned there, and from noon till sunset he was journeying on upward into the heart of a wilderness of mountains. When the western sky began to bloom out in roses and daffodils, he was high above the world, and taking a grassy way that might have been travelled by 7 sheep abreast. The bracken on either side was as high as the wind-driver's knees. Before him the track dipped and wandered continually, so that no more than 30 paces of it would ever be visible at a time. Westward, and he to ride down into it, lay an unseen upland valley, whence, wind-borne, came the sound of pouring and pondering waters. Beyond, new dim peaks and shoulders glowed in opal and silver and violet, and above them a sky all fading gold and roses and primrose and lilac glory. He rode down into the valley, and, as the feather directed him, followed the torrent upwards and the windings and wanderings of the valley. As the dusk came down over the mountains, he came to where the valley widened, and saw, beyond the stream, and about as far away from it as 3 casts of a spear by the best of spearmen, an immense rock towering up into the heavens. It is unknown whether or not it would have been the loftiest in the world, and no less in height than the crag of Gwern Abwy in the ancient days, from which the eagle of Gwern Abwy was accustomed, for the sake of sharpening his beak, to peck at the stars in the evening. Opposite to that, the track branched one way, following the course of the torrent up into the mountains, the other crossing it and running by the foot of the rock. A breath of wind whirled the feather to the left. A little flame of dim blue and purple, it hung in the air over the stream, and then drifted over to the other side. There must be leaping this stream, thought Gurry. Indeed, the breadth of it would be easy for Gyrwyr Gwyntoedd, and not such as to cause boastful thought in his mind, much less the desire for braggart speech, though it might have been impossible for one of a less gifted race of horses. Crossing here, thought Gurry, I shall undoubtedly have the need of the moistening of eyelids. The more he considered, the less was there gainsaying that. He dipped his right forefinger in the horn, and fastened the horn, and set it back in his girdle again. As he was lifting his finger to his eyelids, the wind-driver rose up in his leaping like a swallow in the air. The world changed, and the great foam of innumerable unearthly waters swayed and churned and glimmered about him bewilderingly, with far uncertain sounds, and the passing of 100,000 dreams too swiftly for any of them to be seen or known. It seemed to him that he would have been poised in that dim place of unrealities, for it might have been as long as 7 ages, whence he had come unknown to him, and unknown the nature of his quest. At long last there was a touching of his eyelids and a moistening of them. At that moment the hoofs of the wind-driver were on the solid earth again, and all bewilderment vanished. It was the water from Llandubai that moistened his eyelids, and his own finger that brought it to them. It will be known already that his hand started on that journey at the moment the wind-driver rose in the air. With the touching of the hoofs on the ground, and the torrent cleared, and the eyelids moistened, and the bewilderment vanished, it was clear to him that he had left the Island of the Mighty again, and was beyond the confines of the world. Behind him was the roaring of the torrent, black and impassable, and no piercing it for the vision of man. Before him, for leagues and leagues towards the purple darkness on the edge of the world, a great plain extended, and over it afar through the twilight the roar of shadowy hosts withdrawing from war. He saw their huge encampments on the world edge, their dwellings that rose against the sky and were loftier than the mountains and more innumerable than the innumerable stars. What had appeared from beyond the torrent to be a vast rock was revealed now as a cair, vaster than any in the entire world, and loftier. Beyond doubt it would have had its building at the time when the sky and the mountains were made. It seemed to him that if armies were besieging it, the least of whose warlike captains could crumble the mountains in his fingers, there would be no knowing whether they would succeed in taking it by storm or not. He paused on the edge of the plain for consideration and the making of plans. Rightly spoke the Lady of the Fountain, thought he. It is peace that would be needed in such a place as that. Indeed, a rumour of incessant tumult, of gigantic shouting, was borne out to him from the heart of the cair, in spite of its vastness and the vast thickness of its walls. He dismounted and hid what arms he had under a ledge of rock beside the river. Then, leaving the wind-driver to his peaceable grazing, followed the feather to the portal of the cair. There it rested on the door-clapper, and stirred not until he had fastened it in the brooch on his breast. "Clearly there must be knocking," said he, and knocked. Cried Goody, "Is there a porter?"
"There is. Wherefore, O immortals, is this clamour of knocking? Since the crying of the name, truly, ye have besieged Caer Drais, and during that time we have given ye what warfare ye desired between dawn and dusk daily, and even more than according to your deserts. It is unfitting that ye should break in upon our diversion by night."
"Neither an immortal is knocking, nor anyone bearing arms. A wandering craftsman with his craft it is, from the Island of the Mighty."
"I will tell you," said the porter. "During the daytime we make war upon a numberless company of immortals, and during the night, for the sake of pleasurable diversion, we make war among ourselves. There will be no need for a craftsman, and it would be death for him to enter."
"If ye delight in making war, there will be extreme need for such a craftsman as I am. It would be better to obtain news of the nature of the craft."
"Give me news of it quickly, lest evil happen to thee. Death will overtake the craftsman surely that cometh here with a useless craft."
"3 unusual crafts are with me, and the least of them so little useless that it would be needed by any chieftain, whether in wartime or in times of peace."
"What will the first of them be, in the name of heaven and man?"
"Cooking," said Goody, considering that it would be an easy art for him to practise with the knowledge he had gained of it in Caer Hun. Then he expounded the nature of the cooking according to the insight he had obtained from moistening his eyelids. "If the head of an old toadstool were thrown into the pot," said he, "at the end of this cooking, it would be a nourishing meal for 50 men, or for 100, or indeed for 1,000 if they desired it, and it would seem to everyone that he had never consumed such delicate, wholesome, and well-flavoured food during his life."
"There might be need for such an art as that," said the porter musingly. "What will the second be?"
"A better one than the first," said Goody, "and a more useful to the warward. Sharpening weapons it will be." Then he made clear to the porter the unusual nature of the sharpening. "Were this art to be exercised upon an old hen's feather out of the fowl house," said he, "it would work upon the feather, and imbue it with peculiarities and virtues and magnanimity unknown to it hitherto, and warlike designs and desires such as few would look for in it, and it would succeed in sharpening it into a sword equal to the swords of the gods and the Cymry, and the sword should be either bluer than the sky, or paler than the lightning, or of the hue of the invisible air of heaven, and it would have an edge to wound the wind and cause blood to flow."
"There might well be need of such an art as that," said the porter. "Make known the nature of the third."
"It will be song in the name of heaven," said Goody, remembering the power of Glanach at raising it, and considering that Lonach would be the equal of her sister. "Such song it will be," said he, "that if it were sung to an army of grasshoppers in August, they would readily go against giants, and they would obtain such power and strength and heroic courage and magical prowess out of the singing that it would be amazing if they did not overcome them."
"Ah," said the porter, "there might well be need of such an art as that."
Then he mused and considered within himself.
"Evil upon me," said he, "if in consideration of these 3 arts thou shalt not be admitted into the hall."
With that he opened the portal, and Goody went forward into the hall. There was such a fury of tumult there as had never been made known before to the hearing of man. In the vastness and lurid gloom before him he beheld the warfare of giants, a wild, extreme, insensate warfare, of such a nature that the fighting he had raised in Caer Hun seemed quiet peace in its comparison. There were 7 vast fires on 7 insatiable hearths, the least of them equal to a conflagration in the forest. The flames of them leapt up towards the rafters, higher than the flight of the eagle at dawn. Between each of the fires there was an ample battle-ground for 1,000 giants, without peril of singeing hair or scorching limb. The flames roared and waxed and crackled with the waxing of the tumult, the shouting, the bellowing of meaningless war cries, the thud and thunder of clubs, the crashing of axes, the rending of breaking shields. The clubs would have crushed the mountains, the battle-axes would have cloven the skyward crags. 1,000 giants were wielding them, fierce was their strife. They hacked and hewed and mutually pounded, without cessation, from roaring and ferocity. They had no delight but in wounding each other grievously, and in receiving grievous and hideous wounds. If any was slain, they would not remain slain, but rose up swiftly and went forward with the fighting. Gurri traversed the hall without anyone perceiving him, and came at long last to the open space before the dais. " Yes," said he, " undoubtedly it is the place, for here is what he saw there." The chieftain of Caer Drais throned upon the dais, and high above his head a strong cage of iron, and in it a bird equal in beauty to Adanlanach, or even more beautiful than she. She was of the colour of the blue forget-me-not in the marshland. Her head was sunk beneath her wing. It was clear that she would have been songless and plunged into torpor during the passing of many years. Few would have been without grief beholding her beauty and the ignominy that had been put upon her. " I marvel that Pryderi should not come," thought Gurri. " It would be amazing if yonder bird should be other than Adanlonach." Then he fell to considering what art he should use for setting her free. Peace must be attained first, thought he. It may be a marvel to many that no greeting should have been spoken between the chieftain of Caer Drais and Gurri, although the one of them was throned on the dais, and the other standing before the throne. And indeed, that Gurri should have stood there musing, unheeded and unseen. Here is the reason for it. Huger was the chieftain than any other giant in the hall, and if he exceeded them in bulk and stature, much more did he exceed them in ill-favouredness of aspect. If he had ceased a moment from his roaring and from his laying about him in the air with his club, the whole of the tumult would have waned, and therefore he never did cease from it, nor rose from his throne, but leaned forward there and gazed upon the giants, and roared and laid about him, and maintained the fighting in that way. The louder he roared and the faster he laid about him, the higher leapt the crimson flames from the fires, and the louder and more perilous waxed the warfare of his men. " Is there a silentiary? " shouted Gurri. It was such a shout as might have been heard on a day in July, and the south wind blowing from the top of Penguide in Cornwall to the bottom of Dinsol in the north. But in that hall even he himself obtained no hearing of it. " I myself will perform the office," thought he. Thereupon he went to the pillar that was opposite the throne, and sprinkled it with water from his horn, and smote upon it 3 times after the manner of silentiaries in the courts of kings. In place of demanding silence, he chanted the spell of peace in the midst of war. Such was the power of the water and the smiting and the chanted spell that the chieftain ceased his roaring, and the fires burned low among the ashes, and silence trembled down over the whole hall. " Woe is me !" said the chieftain. " There is a silentiary in the hall." Then he beheld Gurri and smote at him with his club, but Gurri stepped aside from it and beyond his reach. " Alas !" wailed the 1,000 giants, " there is a silentiary !" and fell to bitter mourning. " Why stand ye there idle when the hall is in peril ?" said the chieftain. " Let the silentiary be slain swiftly, according to custom and precedent." It had ever been the usage in Caer Drais to extirpate silentiaries. " Let him be slain in the name of Heaven, lest fearful silence overtake us." " As for silence," shouted Gurri, " although ye may have been dwelling in pitiful silence hitherto, There is an art with me that might well be the means of bringing noise and confusion into the hall. It would be the sorrow of your lives if you should be without gaining knowledge of this." Sadly the chieftain answered him. "Since the dawn of the worlds," said he, "we have striven against silence, and raised up such tumult as we might, out of fear that it would overcome us at last. Owing to this fear there is little joy for us. Beyond doubt, the quietness thou hast found here, and the lack of spirited confusion thou hast complained of, will be signs that our strength is waning. Woe is me, in an age or two there will be silence." The giants sighed. More mournful was this thought to them than any thought in the world. It seemed to them that in the ancient times they would have given no man cause to complain of their quietness. "Undoubtedly silence will overtake you," said Gurry, "unless ye fortify yourselves against it and renew your strength. The art that is with me would be the means of freeing you from this fear." "Make known what art it is, in Heaven's name," said the chieftain. "Cooking it is," said Gurry. "The preparation of nourishing and delectable food and the boiling of it in cauldrons, and thereafter the setting it before you tastefully for the devouring. It would be of such a nature as to be the maintenance of your strength against waning, and the renewal of it perpetually, and indeed the increasing of it 1,000-fold. The food would be in unlimited quantities, and of such natural excellence that little of it would become much, and that the more of it there might be devoured, the greater would be the capacity for devouring, and the greater the capacity for devouring, the mightier would be the power of the lungs for shouting, and the strength of the arms for smiting, so that by the exercise of this art, in a little while there might well come to be warfare and strife and noise and arrogant confusion here, and all this would be at but little cost to yourselves." "During 10,000 years we have tasted no food, lest silence should overcome us while we were consuming it. Undoubtedly thou art right. We are weakening now for lack of nourishment, or there would have been no cause for thy complaints. At what cost to us would be this providing of food?" "At the cost of firing under the cauldron, and of water from the well, and of the head of an old toadstool out of the barn." "Let them be brought to him," said the chieftain, and went back to his roaring, and the giants to their raising up strife. Gurry set the cauldron on the fire and filled it with the water, and flung in the toadstool. The water boiled and the tumult waxed, and the giants became even more restraintless than before. "Their minds are overcrowded with the desire for fighting," thought Gurry. "Distraction will be needed, and the diversion of their thoughts." With that he took his drinking horn, and made known to it what would be required. By that time the chieftain had recovered his rage. "What filth and poison art thou putting into the pot?" he shouted. "Pepper," said Gurry. "Peace be with thee. Pepper it is for the flavouring." "Give me my pepper box. Let me hold it in my hand and examine it, lest thou cheatest us." Gurry gave him the horn. It had no appearance in the world beyond that of an old battered pepper box. As soon as the chieftain had opened it, the whole hall became filled with the odour of pepper, so that the giants were overtaken with violent sternutation until the weapons dropped out of their hands. "Ah!" they murmured, "invigorating is this." "Pepper it is truly," said the chieftain. "Rewards and gratitude thou shalt have, and thou shalt even escape with thy life, if there is such flavour as this in the feast." "Such flavour there will be, and even better," said Gurry. With that the chieftain flung back the pepper box to him, and fell to roaring and laying about him again. Gurry went forward with the cooking. The power of the pepper ebbed, and the giants renewed their fighting, not less vigorous than at first. Somnolence is needed, thought Gurry, and considered how he might obtain it. Then he took his horn again, and made known to it what would be required. Dost thou put more pepper in the cauldron? roared the chieftain. I put it not, said Gurry. More desirable even than pepper is this. Wholesome and pleasant herbs are here, excellent both for flavouring and for nourishment. The leek, the garlic, and the onion. The drops that he shook out of the horn acquired the aspect of these herbs as they fell, and immediately an overpowering and somnolent odour arose from the cooking, soothing the fury of the giants. "Ah!" they murmured. "Ah! Ah! The equal of this hath been unknown to us heretofore." So pervading was the power of leeks and onions through the hall that there was little vigour in the fighting between that and the time the feast was prepared. "The cooking is finished," said Gurry. "Draw forward the tables." They did so. The food he set before them was enough for them all, and more than enough, and it was clear to every one of them that he had never tasted the equal of it during his life, either for flavour or for nourishing excellence. They feasted until midnight and drank until dawn, and then there was borne away from the tables enough for 3 more copious feasts for them, without stint or picking of bones. At midnight the household bard of Caer Drais, such bards as they had there, their office was to stand beside the chieftain upon the dais and to howl execrations for his encouragement while the fighting went forward, looked at the cage. "Lord," said he, "there is danger. The sneezing hath shaken the bars of the cage, and the cessation from warfare hath caused the bird to move her wings." "Trouble me not during the feast," said the chieftain. "Never have I known such delight as this." With dawn they finished their feasting and fell to warfare again, but sluggishly on account of repletion and heaviness after food, and raised barely such tumult as would have kept sleep from the eyelids of every man between the Island of the Mighty and Greece in the east. "Although there is peril for silentiaries," said Gurry, "the office must be performed." Thereupon he went to the pillar again, and sprinkled 7 drops from his horn on it, and smote it 7 times, chanting the spell. At the 7th smiting and the last word, the chieftain forsook his roaring, and the giants their warfare, and the fires burned low, and peace drifted down over the hall like snowflakes when no wind may be blowing. "Woe is me for my birth and pre-existences," sighed the chieftain. "There is a silentiary in the hall, and we are under peril of peace." "Is there no gratitude with ye?" said Gurry. "Is there no desire for martial conflict? Will ye continue for ever at this playful imitation of war?" Chieftain sighed. "Discouraging is this," he said. "We raised the best tumult we could, and it did not please thee. Then we devoured food and renewed our strength, and even increased it 1,000-fold, and thereafter returned to the fighting and put forth our whole vigour, and thou art not yet satisfied. Undoubtedly old age and weakening are overcoming us, or thou wouldst have had no cause for complaint. Silence we shall succumb to. Woe is me!" "It is weapons that ye need, and not strength," said Gurry. "It is a certain slothful quietness of disposition, owing to the use of childish weapons, that troubles ye. Although ye may have been accustomed to peace hitherto, I could exercise such an art in your midst as might well make ye acquainted with the nature of delectable strife." "What art is it, in the name of heaven?" "Sword sharpening it is," said Gurry. "The preparation and making keen of such implements as will cause this playing with clubs and axes to seem dull, miserable, and peaceful." "Will they do that?" said the chieftain. "Will they confirm us in warfare?" "In such warfare as is waged by the gods and the Cymry," said Gurry. "Keen, swift, and pleasurable warfare, and no menace of an end to it. Look you now," said he, "swords I can provide you with. That shall husband your strength in fighting, so that ye shall have more delight out of it in a day than ye have obtained heretofore in a year, and with less waste of exertion. and if any of you should be overtaken with slumber, the pricking of the swords would awaken him, so excellent are they. And I can put the blue sharpening on them, or the lightning coloured, or the sharpening of the hue of the invisible air, and they should have an edge to wound the wind of heaven, and all this would be at but little cost to you."
"Marvellous is this indeed," said the chieftain. "Delightful to our hearing is this excellent news. At what cost to us would it be?"
"At the cost of the wear of the grindstone," said Goody, "and of the fetching of feathers from the fowl house to be sharpened into swords."
"Let the feathers and the grindstone be set before him."
They did so. 3 old tail feathers from the fowl house they gave him, a black and a brown and a grey one. "Which of the 3 sharpenings dost thou desire on the first sword?" said Goody.
"The blue sharpening."
Thereupon he took the black feather and dropped 3 drops out of the horn upon the grindstone.
"Dost thou put pepper on the grindstone?" said the chieftain.
"Not so," said Goody. "Oil it is." He held up the horn, and it had no likeness to anything in the world but to an oil vessel, nor the water in it to anything but oil.
"I marvel at this," said the chieftain,
and for marvelling half forgot his roaring and his laying about him with the club. Goody began to turn the stone, holding the feather to it, and chanting the spell of peace in the midst of war. The feather grew and hardened. A stridulent scream of sharpening rose up, and sparks flew innumerably into the air. More and more swiftly he turned the grindstone. The scream increased and swayed from this note to that, now as keen as the war cry of the falcon when she sees the heron in the air, now as low and deep and filled with murmurings as the undertone of the cataract heard from afar. It took some semblance of music, a thing unknown in Caer Drais since the worlds were made. The giants forgot their warfare and fell to watching and listening and marvelling. Adenlonach stirred in her cage and lifted her right wing. "Ah," said Goody, "here is the sword." In his hand it gleamed, a great griding gasher, a warlike weapon, and the whole bloom and beauty of the June sky at noonday shining from it. It had been given to none of them to wield such a weapon as that. Distaste for clubs and battle-axes seized them at the sight of it. It seemed to them that if they might obtain 1,000 of its like, fighting would become a bliss to them such as they had never dreamed of, and that they would pursue the immortals along the borders of space.
"Ah," they murmured, "a bright, beaming marvel is this." "What peculiarities are with it?" said the chieftain.
"It would cut through the bole of an oak tree 900 winters old, at a hand's breadth from the ground where it was thickest," said Goody. "It would do that at one sweeping stroke, and then not be at the end of its powers, nor consider it a matter for boasting. Indeed, it was such a sword as might easily have accomplished as much as that."
"Would it do that?" said the chieftain. "Would it wound the invisible wind? Thou gavest me news of wounding the wind and of causing blood to flow."
"It would not," said Goody. "Swords that have the blue sharpening have not attained that art." Then he took the brown feather. "What sharpening wilt thou have on the second sword?" said he.
"The lightning coloured," said the chieftain.
Thereupon Goody took the horn and dropped 7 drops on the grindstone, and chanted the spell of peace in the midst of war, and began sharpening the brown feather. More marvellously it grew under the screaming stridulance of the grindstone, even than the black feather had grown. Louder and keener and fiercer was the sound of the turning and the whizzing and wearing of the steel, and in turn it would be sinking to hollower, far gurglings and more slumberous undertones, rising and falling, and surging and swaying, and rippling and trilling, and swelling and whirling, and triumphing nearer and nearer it came to having the semblance of music with it, and that the most martial and heroic music in the world, and not less courteous than martial. If anyone had looked up at Adenlonach at that time, here is what he would have seen with her: a lifting and spreading of her 2 wings, and a folding of them again, and a raising of her proud and gentle crowned head. "Ah!" said Goody, "here is the sword." Splendidly it gleamed in his hand, one long flashing excellence of the colour of the lightning of heaven. Its glance, its beam, its pure brightness sent a ripple of delight and purification through the minds of the giants. They looked down at their weapons with repugnance. One by one they dropped them silently, desiring a more courteous warfare than they had known before. They remembered the warfare of the gods, and hungered to wage the like of it, or none at all.
"Ah, ah," they murmured. "Wonderful and beautiful truly is the sword." "Wonderful and beautiful it is," said the chieftain. Then he said, "What peculiarities are with it?"
"It would cut through the mote upon the sunbeam," said Goody, taking pains to enumerate its gifts with precision. "Upon the downward sweep it would cleave through the mote lightly, and divide it in such a manner that the one half should be neither greater nor less than the other. Or it would shave the beard from a midget in the air upon an evening in August beside the stream in the valley, and that without causing wound or scratch or effusion of blood, or even knowledge in the shaved one that his beard had been shaven."
"Would it do that indeed?"
said the chieftain. "It would," said Gurry, "and would consider it no cause for boasting. No granite in the mountains of the world could withstand the edge of this sword if it had a mind for cleaving things. No one that beheld it could have doubted that the sword was equal to this, and more than equal to it."
"Would it wound the wind?" said the chieftain. "Indeed, would it cause blood to flow from the invisible wind of heaven?"
"Ah, no," said Gurry. "Swords that have the lightning-coloured sharpening have not attained that art." The chieftain sighed.
"Although the swords that thou hast made are good swords, and although little accusation could be brought against them, it is none other than the wind-wounder that we desire."
"Thou shalt have it," said Gurry, and went again to his sharpening. He took his horn and poured the whole of the water in it onto the grindstone, and in place of the third feather from the fowl house took the feather of Adanlonach that he had had from to buy of the fountain. "It will need the best of feathers for this work," thought he. No sooner had the tip of it touched the stone than, instead of stridulance and screaming, sweet keen song rose up from it, keener and sweeter than the mountain lark's penillion that he strews over the skies in the morning, 1,000,000 times keener and sweeter. The sparks fled forth from the meeting of steel and stone, and rose up to the rafters, and were whirled hither and yonder, and played among the rafters in a fountain of many-coloured flames. With the jewels in the mines of the world, or with the flowers of May upon the mountains, there would be no equalling them in glory or in beauty of hue. The giants drew near and watched him. As they beheld the sword grow, and the flame of the sparks kindle and gleam and lighten, they marvelled in their delight, and murmured gently, and forgot fighting and brutality, and desired beauty and peace. The cage of Adanlonach was enveloped in splendour, so that no one was able to behold what light began to glow from it, and to be resplendent, and to impart to the iron bars the nature of the daffodil clouds of the dawn. No one was able to behold the lightnings and glories irradiant through the sky-beautiful wings and feathers of Lonach herself. Loud and sweet and wonderful rose the song of the steel sword and the stone. Even the murmur of delight was quieted in the giants. The music beat upon the roof like sea spray in the caves. The whole hall grew dizzy with the loud, keen, gleaming ecstasy of it, and still it grew keener and keener, and shriller, and sweeter and sweeter. "Ah," said Goody, "at last! Here is a sword." It was as much as 13 times as beautiful as either of the others, and indeed more than that. The gleam of the sunlight on the shore wave, on the curling, glittering breast of it, when it glitters and sparkles before the forming of foam, would be dull and without beauty in its comparison. It was neither blue like the noon, nor yellow and pale like the lightning of heaven. It seemed less a sword of steel or bronze than an intense gap of hard brightness in the midst of the invisible air, more invisible but for brightness than the air itself. ' Ah ! Ah !' murmured the giants. ' Ah ! Ah !' It seemed to them all that they had never experienced delight until then. If they remembered their old-time warfare, they remembered it with disgust and shame and repugnance. ' Marvellous it is, and beautiful beyond beauty,' said the chieftain. ' Make known its peculiarities, if it please you.' ' It is a wind wounder,' said Gurry. ' Beyond doubt its edge would wound the wind.' ' Would it cause blood to flow from it ?' said the chieftain. ' Without if or were it not,' said Gurry, ' faster than the fall of the dewdrop from the blade of reed grass in the morning, when the dew of June is at its heaviest.' ' In the name of Heaven, make trial of it,' said the chieftain. ' Never have I desired anything so much as to see this marvel.' ' I will show thee,' said Gurry, ' and I will make known the third of my 3 arts likewise.' ' What art is that ?' said the chieftain. ' Song,' said Gurry, ' song, as should cause grasshoppers to go against giants and to overcome them.' With that he leapt up lightly upon the grindstone and swept the sword circling through the air. The whole hall lightened and flashed at every sweep of it. Then he raised up the chant of peace in the midst of war, loudly, so that everyone should hear and be enspelled by it. 7 times the sword circled. There was no seeing its passage, but only the likeness of the sun of heaven resplendent above his head. Nearer and nearer flew the point to the cage where Lonach, the bird of Rhianon, was imprisoned, where she fluttered and preened her wings, desiring to remember the art of song. At the 7th sweep of the sword and the 3rd raising of the chant, here is what happened. With extreme truth this is recorded. Diamond drops began to fall out of the air, diamond coloured blood out of the invisible wind, more swiftly than the fall of the dewdrop from the blade of reed grass in the morning when the dew of June is at its heaviest. Then, suddenly, it was as if the full moon were to take wings and to fly up into the midst of the sky against the blackness of the darkest night in the year. It was Adan Lonach upon the wing. With the rising of her delicate transcendent splendour, song filled the Caer, such as, if it willed, would have imposed sleep on an army of restless hellions, or, if it willed, would have raised up an army of grasshoppers on the driest day in August to wage impetuous warfare against the giants of the ancient world, and a marvel if they did not overcome the giants. It was Lonach, the bird of Rhiannon. It was she upon the wing, raising song. The sword had sundered the bars of her cage. The spell had brought her memory of her ancient skill in music. Her singing was a coolness for all aching, and the passing of desire and ferocity into peace. She raised the song, she multiplied it marvellously, the notes of it and their swaying and pouring and crooning and their bewilderment of sweet keen ecstasy entered into the nature of the giants. From ill-favoured they became fair, from uncouth and furious, noble of aspect and bearing, they became acquainted with delight and peace and wisdom. They heard the breaking of the gates of their Caer without sorrow. Without fear they beheld the princely immortals enter. They saw the immortals shine at the end of the hall like the glory of a daffodil dawn, a daffodil and foxglove dawn above the mountains. They lifted their arms and sang, hailing their beautiful immortals. The immortals called them forth. They went out from the hall following them. As they went, Gurry heard this verse from the giants: We that have warred since, a slumbering clod, this wild world woke to the spoken flame
and felt in her heart the dreams of God, and heard in her dream the chanted name. We have felt the flame of a keener fire than kindleth ire in the wrath ensouled. We have heard the songs of the dragon choir, and how shall we dwell where we dwelled of old?
And he heard this verse from the immortals: Sleep must wane, and the weltering world hither and yon be whirled in war, and life be laved in the foam uphurled from passionate Abred's storm-tossed shore. But always strife shall be merged in peace, and the storm in calm, and the dawn grow gold, the flame a song, and the tumult cease, and how shall ye dwell where ye dwelled of old? And he heard this verse from the giants again, answering them:
How should we come to our warfare's goal, unknown of old until night was drawn into this wonder of time made whole, this peace in the daffodil heart of dawn? We that have warred since the chanted name rolled in flame through the primal cold, we have felt the breath of the quickening flame, and how should we dwell where we dwelled of old?
End of Part 19. Part 20 of The Fates of the Princes of Dyfed by Kenneth Morris. The story of Rhianon and Pryderi, the second branch of it called The Three Unusual Arts of Tyrion and Gwri Gwalt Eirene and the Freeing of the Birds of Rhianon. 3. The Quest of Adenfuinach, the Third Bird, and the Opposition of the Hosts of Bargodobud. When he came out into the daylight, it was out of a mere cave in the vast rock that he came. There was nothing with the aspect of a Caer there, and no tents of the encamped immortals, but only mountains along the borders of the world. He mounted Gyrwr Gwyntoedd and rode forward until he came to the field of Llandibai. It was evening when he came there, and the well was under no spell of concealment from him. He dropped the sword, the Wind-Wounder, into the well. It turned into a blue feather and floated there, not different from what it had been at first. As soon as it touched the surface of the water, Tobai of the fountain rose up before him.
"I marvel that you should come here," said she. "Adenlonach is made free, without your having freed her."
"Princess," said he, "not with the two that are freed, but with the one that is bound is my concern. For the sake of bringing success to Pryderi, will it be permitted to me to go in quest of Adenfuinach?"
"Out of courtesy it will be permitted to you, and for no better reason than that," said she. "There will be no success attainable for you."
"If it please you, give me news concerning this bird."
"There are better colours on her wings than in the rainbow, and her singing is more magical than any other sound in the world. On account of her preeminence, neither Glanach nor Chlonach will allow themselves to be compared with Muinach. Her music is the passing of the heart from its bondage, the fulfilment of the ultimate concerns of the soul. No one would obtain success at freeing her except Pryderi Fab Pwyll, and even he would not obtain it unless he were master of the third of the three unusual arts of the gods and Druids."
"Yes, indeed," said Gwri. "It is known to me that he would need the spell of the three places."
"What three places are they?"
said she. "Three places in Wales, and the power of the gods that dwell in them," said Gwri.
"You have not named them,"
said she. "Rarely are they named," said he. "The first is the wood of Mon, and the second is this field."
"Water from the fountain I give you, and this feather that Adenfuinach dropped here."
It was like a little cloud out of the sunset for brightness and beauty.
"Put you the feather on the wind in the morning, and go forward where it may lead you, and heed you this counsel," said she. "Let neither peace nor war turn you from this quest, and partake not of food nor drink, and give no ear to song nor story in the place where you may hear lies spoken. For it is the nature of Adenfuinach to abhor falsehood, and it would lead to spells being put upon you, as they were put upon her also on the day when you were born."
With that she was taken into the viewlessness again. In the cold of dawn and the youth of the day he rose up and went forward by ways unknown, following the feather. By mid-morning he passed the ford and the marshland and mountains of Caerhun, but turned not to the leftward. At noon he rode by the head of the valley where Caer Drais from old had been besieged by the Immortals. But the feather had no mind for crossing the torrent there, and he rode on towards the east and upward into the lonely places of the mountains. The torrent grew smaller and smaller as he drew nearer to its source. From pouring and pondering over mossy rocks, it was now but rippling over pebbly shallows, and now no more than tinkling and whispering down the peaty softness of the mountain side. There all path came to an end, and only the wild sweet breast of the mountain rose and rose above and before him. "Gurra Gwyntoedd," said he, "there will be no travelling farther for you." "Whatever may please you," thought the wind driver. "There is good grazing here." There was no concealing thought, the one from the other, between those two. The feather still drifted and glimmered upward, and made no pretence of crossing the runlet. Long he followed it, climbing the steep. At the very eye and birthplace of the waters, a place greener than the emerald and lovely with rush tufts and forget-me-not blossom, a sudden gust carried it to the left, and it was clear they would be passing from the island of the mighty again. "Not without the moistening of eyelids," thought Goody. The foam and bewilderment of the world rose above him. Innumerable swift dreams drove by like snowflakes on the wind. He heard the sound of rushing armies invisible above his head, a storm and torrent of swift loud hoofs and chariot wheels, a thunder and a grievous cry. It might have been the passing of 10 ages before he felt the touch of his forefinger on his eyelids, and the moistening of them with the water of the well. His feet were on firm ground again, and the island of the mighty was gone. But now there was no sudden vanishing of the mists, no cessation of bewilderment. What had been dim confusion took certitude and definition. The tumult of phantom armies came dropping down into a grim, clamorous reality. He beheld the whirling smoke above him, filled with the rush and onsweep of the mighty. The cry that had been far and uncertain became the hoarse roar of a warlike multitude. They gathered and circled and drove downward and inward upon him. Gigantic chariots whirled and reeled and vanished. Their scythes were of pale and subtle flame that leapt and flickered outward, licking the mists. Kneeling charioteers leaned forward, holding the reins. They were of stern, immortal beauty, dark flame upon their brows for hair. The warriors in the chariots leaned upon their immense spears of ashwood, their eyes far and flaming with visions of war, their lips apart, their throats strained with shouting. They gathered, whirling and circling, and drove on like the tempest, downward and nearer. Louder and louder grew the tumult, rarer the mist, prouder and sterner the menace of their aspect. Sunlight gleamed upon the spearhead, the axe-head upon the long flaming brightness of the brand. Downward and inward, sweeping and circling they whirled, impetuous as the conflagration among the pine trees of the valley, louder than the proud storm of the north. Streaming were their silken banners, with due adornment of lurid dragons. They were upon him, the immense chariots imminent, the menacing flaming spears at point. There rose a shout, a crashing, a thunder, like the 9th tempest-driven billow upon the craggy headlands of the north. The sun shone out over a broad plain, and beyond it, over a lake of the width of the world. The feather of Adenfuinach hung in the air above the shore. There was no sign nor rumour of an army anywhere. Goody went forward. As he was nearing the shore, he heard a sudden shout and beheld a chariot with its huge horses motionless between him and the shore, and in it, behind the kneeling charioteer, a warrior, dark, stern-visaged, handsome, and vaster in stature than any in the world since the days of the Emperor Arthur. Gurry knew him for one of the host that he had seen driving down out of the air. The wings upon his helmet were of lurid flame. His long wind-blown mantle was dark crimson and fastened with a brooch of rubies. His coat was of dark blue linen, adorned with silver ornaments of the value of 50 kine. "The greeting of the god and man to you," said Goody Gwalt Eirene. "The greeting of the god and man to you also," said the warrior. "Go back, if it please you, to the Island of the Mighty, while life remains in your body." "Courteously I refuse this request," said Goody. "I came here following yonder feather, and following it I will go forward beyond the border of the world." "There will be no going forward without encountering the opposition of hosts." "Make known to me what hosts they will be, if it please you." "Mighty and invincible hosts they will be, the men of the King of Bargod Ubid," said the warrior. "Yonder is the lake of the Bargod, and beyond it is Caer Heth. Therein dwells a company of the immortals that have known no strife since the crying of the name. It would be unfitting that their delight should be broken by men from the Island of the Mighty, and therefore no one may pass the lake without overcoming the whole host of the Bargod, and it would not be possible for any man to overcome them. Opposition I desire, and extreme fighting, and not to go forward until usage shall have been complied with." With that the warrior came down out of his chariot. "I am the King's disdain of Bargod Ubud," said he. "It is my right to be the first upon the field of conflict, and to encounter the stranger, body against body, before any other man of the host shall encounter him." "It will be an honour to me to make combat with you," said Goody. Thereupon he made bare his breast for the battle, according to the custom of the gods and men of the Island of the Mighty. He raised the dragon shout, and went forward against the disdain, and the disdain against him. Body against body they fought upon the shore until nightfall. It seemed to Goody that he had dwelt in profound peace from the moment of his birth until then. At nightfall he slew the disdain, and made a pile of his armour on the shore. Then he turned to the charioteer. "Take you the armour," said he, "and bear it for a gift to the King of the Bargod." He did so, and as soon as the armour was loaded upon the chariot, man and car and horses vanished. Then there came up out of the water another chariot, drawn by 2 immense pearl-white, dimly luminous steeds. It was 3 times larger than the chariot of the disdain, and formed of dark bronze adorned with shining sapphires. The warrior that stood in it was vaster of stature than the other, more handsome, prouder, and darker of mien. His long mantle blew out from his shoulders towards the lake. It was of the colour of pearl and mother of pearl, and shone wanly in the dusk of the evening. On it was embroidered a carmine, ramping, fierce-eyed dragon, brighter and redder than the sunset cloud. His brooch was of the size of a king's breastplate, a vast light-giving carnelian set with opals. His helmet glowed and burned against the night sky, redder than the rising harvest moon. As for the spear whereon he leaned, it was a long, lithe, keen, impatient gainer of victories. "The greeting of the god and the man to you," said Goody Gwalt Eirene. "Good greeting to you also," said the other. "Yonder upon the hill is the guest house," said he, "and therein there is feasting prepared for you tonight, and the songs of 7 skilful institutional bards, and a bed of skins and silk upon the sleeping bench. With the dawn of the morning you shall be free to go back to the Island of the Mighty, if it please you. Or, if it please you, you shall experience fighting here." "May it be requited to you for this excellent courtesy," said Goody. "I will experience the fighting, and may it be requited better if the courtesy is extended." "In what way might it be extended?" "Rest is better after labour than before it," said Goody. "Were I given my free choice, I would have the fighting first." "You shall have it," said the other, "and no cause for complaint of stint. Ample fighting shall you have. Where 1 opposed you in the daytime, 10 shall make war upon you during the night, and the least of them stronger and more valiant and better at strategy than the man you have slain. I am the Pentyli of the war host of the King of Bargod Ubud," said he. "It will be my right and privilege to be the 10th man at the head of them." Thereupon he turned towards the lake and sounded the high aton of the men of the Bargod upon his horn, and having sounded it, came down out of his chariot. 9 stern, tall, princely warriors rose up out of the lake and came forward. They were equal in strength and beauty, and in richness of dress and armour, to their lord, the Pentili. The dullest of their 10-horned helmets glowed like the crimson setting sun. The poorest of their glimmering pearl-pale mantles was embroidered with a ruby-coloured rose-rich dragon. The least of their keen silver-headed spears would have been capable of victories on the confines of hell. Courteously they greeted Gurri. Courteously in return he greeted them. "It is a delight to us," they said, "to afford you this warfare. We take pleasure in your pleasure of being 1 man against 10. Greater will be the honour of opposing you," said he, "than would be the honour of opposing 100 mortals." Then he raised up the dragon shout and went forward against them, and the 10 of them went forward against him, and the Pentili the 10th at the head of them. He remembered the warfare he had waged against the Disdain. It seemed to him to have been a peaceful and soothing dream. He slew 3 of them before the rising of the moon. He slew 3 of them between her rising and her setting. He slew 3 in the darkness before the dawn. At dawn he slew the Pentili also, and made 10 piles of their armour beside the shore. Then he turned to the charioteer of the Pentili that waited in the chariot. "Take you the armour for a gift to the King of the Bargod," said he. The charioteer came down and gathered up the armour. As soon as it was loaded in the chariot, man and car and horses vanished. "Will there be going forward now?" thought Gurri, and turned towards the dawn-white water. As he turned, a vast chariot rose up out of the lake, drawn by 2 beautiful mist-grey steeds, compared with which the horses of the Pentili were no better than ill-kept yearling foals. The chariot was 3 times greater than the chariot of the Pentili had been. It was formed of unpolished silver, inlaid with turquoise stones for the sake of adornment and magical virtue. The warrior that stood in it was 3 times more handsome and better equipped than the Pentili, and he was greater in stature. His long wind-blown silken mantle was of the colour of the sky, with whiteness of clouds drifting and wandering over it. His swan-winged, beautiful, regal helmet was of silver, whiter than the wither when the sunlight glitters on the snows of January on it. His brooch was of peerless pearl, and it was larger than a warrior's shield. The well-combed hair hung down over his shoulders, darker and more lustrous than the starling's wing. His shield was 1 great gleaming moon of silver. The sight of his spear alone would have put the leagued and hosted demons of Abred to flight. "The greeting of heaven and man to you, in princely courtesy and warlike kindliness," said Gurri Gwaltyreen. "Even better be it to you than to me," said the other. "I am the King's heir of Bargod y Budd, and I come to counsel you to return to the Island of the Mighty before harm befall you." "Courteous is the counsel," said Gurri, "and courteously it will be refused." "Even if it be refused," said the King's heir, "there is further courtesy to follow it. The King of the Bargod has received the gifts of armour that you have sent him, and he desires to requite you for them regally. For that reason, the need of fighting will not be imposed upon you today, nor tomorrow, nor until such time as you may desire it. Yonder on the hill is the guest house. Therein you shall feast until noon and drink until night, when food for 100 men shall be set before you. There shall be 10 skilful institutional bards to sing verses to you, and 10 more to relate stories. And whensoever you may desire rest, there shall be silk and furs laid upon an ivory sleeping bench for you, and the ivory inlaid with bronze and opals." "Rarely have I been offered the like of this regal courtesy," said Gurri. "May it be requited to you profusely, and may it be requited to you even better if the courtesy is extended." "What extension might there be, in the name of heaven?" "Rest after labour is better than rest before it," said Gurri. "I shall have little appetite for feasting until I have crossed and recrossed yonder lake." "There will be no crossing of it without encountering opposition first," said the King's heir. "I should enjoy the feasting better if I came to it after encountering the opposition," said Gurri.
It shall be according to your desire, said the King's heir. Where you oppose 10 in the night, you will encounter 100 during the day, and the worst of them stronger and fiercer and more skilful than the best of the 10, and I myself will be the 100th at the head of them. This will be a main privilege for me, said Gurry. An unwonted delight will it be indeed. Thereupon the King's heir of the Bargod came down out of his chariot and blew the high aton on his horn. For answer there came a mighty war shout, and a company of 19 80 men came running up out of the lake. In strength and beauty of aspect, in dignity of mien and splendour of accoutrements, they were none of them less than their lord the King's heir. With extreme courtesy they greeted Gurry, and not less courteously he greeted them. Anyone would have known that they were all the sons of sovereign rulers, accustomed to wars upon the borders of the world. As soon as the greetings were finished, they formed in battle array on the shore. Gurry raised the dragon shout and went forward blithely against them, and they went forward against him. The least of them were much better men than the best of the men of the Pentile. Exceedingly vehement was their onslaught. With exceeding vehemence Gurry opposed them. He slew 20 of them before noon, and 20 more between noon and dusk. Between dusk and moonrise he slew 20, and 20 before the moon set. Between that and dawn, the 20 that were left gathered their strength and remembered their prowess, and thundered upon him a rage to shake the mountains. Man by man he put quietude upon them, and released them from their bodies, and at dawn he slew the King's heir also. Then he made 10 huge glittering piles of their armour upon the beach, and gave them to the charioteer to take to the King. There will be no need for him to take them, said a voice from the lake. I myself am here to receive them, and to give thee counsel also. Gurry turned, and beheld a chariot drawn up out of the lake by 3 immense chestnut-coloured stallions of supreme strength and beauty. With every motion of their shell-formed hoofs they raised up waves of spray and foam as high as the shaft of the chariot. The dawn sun burned upon their burning, tossing manes. The chariot was of gold, richly adorned with precious rubies. He that stood in it, leaning on his golden, flame-bright, terrible spear, was huger of form and limb, sterner and nobler of bearing, loftier of beauty, and more magnanimous of soul than any of the others had been. His winged helmet was brighter than the noon sun. His hair and his long beard were of the colour of the wheat field at bright noonday, 3 days before the harvest. His long mantle was more purple than the purple flowing wave. On it was embroidered a regal dragon in the purest gold. His brooch was of diamonds, topazes, and rubies. His coat was of woven gold, ruddier than the gold of the dragon. His breastplate was like the sun, the sheath of his sword brighter than the lightning. The greeting of the god and the man to the King of the Bargod, said Gurry. Courteously and with respect it is given. Make known to me the counsel if it please you. Courteous and honourable be the greeting to you also, said the King of the Bargod. The counsel will be that you return to the Island of the Mighty after receiving courtesy and entertainment here, and before the nature of war and strife and fighting is made known to you. Courteous and kindly is the counsel, said Gurry. Courteously and in a kindly manner will it be refused. I came here for the sake of going forward after encountering what opposition might be prepared. Opposition you shall have at the hands of 1,000 men, said the King, and I myself will be the 1,000th at the head of them. The puniest of them all will be 10 times better and stronger than any of the men you have slain. An exceptional delight and honour will this be to me, truly, said Gurry. Without stint or reservation it shall be accorded to you. All the battles you have fought hitherto shall seem like peace and quietude in comparison with this. But first, courtesy shall be extended to you in accordance with custom, and in consideration of your valour and generosity and mighty deeds. I myself will accompany you to the guest house, and therein you shall abide for 7 days and 7 nights. Each day I shall see that collops cooked and peppered are set before you, and an abundance of luscious wine and mead, food for 50 men in the morning, and food for 100 at night. Each day there shall be 70 skilful, wise, institutional bards, the best in the world, to sing songs to you, and 70 more to relate stories. And at dawn and at sunset you shall bathe in a cauldron of cure to strengthen you, and there shall be a sleeping bench of gold for you at night, inlaid with the turquoise and encrusted with the diamond. Greater will its value be than the value of 10,000 kine, and on it shall be spread coverings of embroidered silk, and pictures of the gods and of dragons worked upon them, and beneath the coverings the down of sea-birds, deeper than the height of a man.
Excellent is this courtesy indeed, said Goody. May it be requited to you in ample measure. May you lack hereafter nothing that you desire. Hardly might such hospitality be surpassed even in the Island of the Mighty, even in the house of the King of London. Yet it might be surpassed.
Make known to me how it might be surpassed, said the King, and out of gratitude nothing shall be refused to you.
It might be surpassed in this way, said Goody. Rest after exertion is pleasant and honourable, but rest before it is a sorrow to the brave. Disgrace would fall upon the whole kindred of the Cymry were I to accept feasting before experiencing warfare. I came not here for the sake of consuming food, truly. If the fighting might continue without intermission, the courteous hospitality you have offered me would be surpassed.
Be it requited to you for making this known to me, said the King. The courtesy shall be extended in accordance with your desires.
Thereupon he lifted a dazzling horn of diamond to his lips and sounded the high aton of the Bargod, and having sounded it, came down out of his chariot. The lakeside lighted with the glory of 1,000 dawns. 919 fourscore were the men that came up out of the water. The smallest of them was huger of stature than the King's heir had been. The poorest in adornment shone more resplendently. Courteously they greeted Goody. Courteously in return he greeted them. Noble were the words they spoke concerning the men of the Island of the Mighty. Noble words he spoke again concerning the magnanimity and lofty lineage of the men of Bargodabud. It seemed to them all that his friendship or his enmity would be equally delightful to them. It seemed to him that it would be equally pleasant to him to oppose them in conflict or to feast with them in the hall.
Will it please you that the strife should have its opening? Said they. It will, said he.
With that they drew up in battle array on the shore and sounded the war shout of the Bargod, and Goody raised up the shout of the dragon, and mutually they went forward against each other. Proud and vehement was the flight of spears. Hosted Abred would have been frightened at the sight of it, but he made circles about him with his sword, and reaped the heads from the spears as they flew. Such were his skill and strength and courage, and his complete valour, that the learning he had obtained from Tur Fliant his foster-father, and the lofty, indomitable nature of his soul, that they obtained no success or advantage against him. He fought until noon and slew 200. He fought until dusk and slew 300 more. Between dusk and midnight he put quietude upon 250 of them. Between that and dawn, the 250 that were remaining gathered their strength and remembered their old-time exploits and renown, and came against him in such a manner that it seemed to him that they had been at playful sport until then. Man by man he prevailed against them, and reaped them, and caused them to quit their bodies in delight at the nature of the fighting they had experienced. By dawn he had slain 269. "Are you content with the fighting?" said he. "I am not content," said the King of the Bargod. "Even though it has been such fighting as I have not remembered, there will be no going forward for you
until I am slain also." They went forward with their fighting until the sun had shaken himself free from the edge of the world and shone wanly over the mist-hidden waters. "Are you content now?" said Goody Gwaltairine. "Indeed, I am content, being slain," said the King of the Bargod. Then he said, "Pleasant is death to me truly, having become at last acquainted with the nature of fighting and war. Delightful it is to me to have received this satisfaction." With that he rose up unwearied from his slain body, and he and the whole of his host were taken into the viewlessness. As for Goody, he went up to the guest house and bathed in the cauldron of cure, and ate what food he needed, and slept for 3 days and 3 nights without waking. Here is what was made known to him in his sleep and dreams. He saw the King of the Bargod, and the King's heir, and the Pentili, and the lordly Disdain, and the whole of their proud, magnanimous host. They circled about him in the air, driving their flame-rich chariots. Unwounded they had arisen. In great splendour they went forth, circling, wheeling, flaming, raising song. Here is the song they raised, so far as he was able to remember it afterwards. "Though we were slain full many a time have we risen again. He that would hearken the age's rhyme must meet us here by the border main, must bare his breast to the spear sublime, till the mortal life in his life be slain. And some shall fail for 1,000 years, and some shall win in a night and a day, and the eyes of some shall be blind with tears, and the hearts of some shall be always gay. But come they singing or dumbed with fears, they shall win ere they wend their onward way. And he that comes and is slain on the shore, shall he meet no more with the guardian clan? Hath he come to the peace at the end of war, the peace that was ere the worlds began? Nay, age on age shall the combat roar, till that which was man is more than man. For we that bide by the brink of time, that have fallen so oft and arisen again, should we leave unhedged with our spears sublime the world's far edge? Should we rest, being slain? Ages were reft of their rhythm and rhyme, and the star in the heart of the world would wane. End of Part 20. Part 21 of The Fates of the Princes of Dyfed by Kenneth Morris. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The story of Rhianon and Pryderi, the second branch of it called The Three Unusual Arts of Rhianon and Goody Gwaltairine, and the Freeing of the Birds of Rhianon. 4. The Three Kinsmen of the Ferryman of the Lake of the Bargod, and the Spell of the Three Places in Wales. At the dawn of the 4th morning he awoke, and rose up stronger than ever he had been in his life, and went down to the shore. The waters of the lake were hued like the turquoise and the beryl, clearer and sweeter than any waters in mortal lands. Neither to the right nor to the left was there any sign of boundary or limit to them, nor was there any farther shore visible between the lake and the sky before him. The feather of Aden Fuinach, that had floated in the air without falling since he came to the Bargod, now drifted out from land, blown by the gentlest wind in the world. "There must be crossing this sea," he said, "and a marvel if there is no ferry." Then he shouted, "Is there a ferryman?" "There is," came the cry. It seemed as if a pink rose dropped from heaven onto the far water, and began to glow and grow there. Out of the heart and middle glory of it, a boat drew towards the shore. It was shaped like the petal of a wild rose from the hedgerows of Chemais, and fashioned of one great luminous rose pearl of beautiful curves and lines. In the boat stood the ferryman, dark, quiet-eyed, of subtle grace and dignity. He was one of the beautiful family of Gwyn the son of Nudd, and for hair on his head he had plumes of azure flame.
The greeting of heaven and man to you, said Goody Gualtairine. Will there be any crossing the lake? There will, said the ferryman, and you shall not be chargeable for it. With that he drew in to the shore, and Goody went into the boat with him. If it please you, said Goody, I desire to follow yonder feather. We will follow it, said the ferryman. He sat down in the front of the boat and began his rowing. They went forward until noon in silence. Then the ferryman said, Have you come here from the Island of the Mighty? I have, said Goody. There was a kinsman of mine dwelling there in the days of the Emperor Arthur, said the ferryman. He was a man of whom no one ever spoke less than good. I desire to hear tidings of him. What name was with your kinsman? Said Goody. All, the son of Olwydd, according to his nature, said the ferryman. 7 years before he was born, his father's swine were stolen, and when he grew up to be a man, he tracked the swine through the 3 worlds, and brought them back in 7 herds without losing one of them. He had a keen sense of smell. He could track the bee from the blossom to the hive 3 days after her gathering the honey, and he could tell whether she had taken it from the rose or from the meadowsweet, from the hawthorn or from the heather. The path of last year's salmon through the sea, all could easily follow it swimming blindfold. Indeed now, said he, I should be discourteous beyond bounds if I permitted you to remain longer without hearing the story of all. Thereupon he began narrating it with marvellous bardic skill, chanting it and weaving it together with pleasant consonances and assonances, delightful to the hearing. As he went forward with it, the air darkened with pansies blooming out of invisibility, reddened with crimson roses that had no stem nor root. The scent of them spread out over the lake. It filled the whole region between the water and the sky. It was sweeter than honey. It was far sweeter than honey. Sweet and heavy, laden with soft heaviness, it breathed out from the purple of the pansies, from the rich imperial crimson of the roses. The ferryman stopped his rowing that he might have his 2 hands free for narrating the story. With pleasant consonance and assonance, with delightful rhythm, he unfolded the achievements of the son of Olwydd, and multiplied the slumber-laden breathing of the flowers. Sleep came drifting down about the boat. The scent of roses and pansies rose up like mists along the edge of the world in the evening. There was no seeing the feather where it floated in the air. The boat followed it no longer, but wandered northward with the current. There must be an end of this narrating the story of all, thought Goody. The 3rd day, said the ferryman, he came into the cantref of Mabinogion, and there was a care there. Not so, said Goody, it was not to the cantref of Mabinogion that he came. Wherefore sayest thou this? Said the ferryman, and sighed. Out of regard for accuracy and the art of story-telling, said Goody. And true it was that All was never in the cantref of Mabinogion during his life, so far as there is knowing. Although he came not to Mabinogion either on the 3rd day or the 4th, yet it was to a place in Wales that he came, and indeed to 3 places. Unless the nature of them were known, no one could tell the story. What was the nature of them? Said the ferryman. What places were they, in the name of heaven? I will make the first of them known to you, said Goody, that you may relate this story accurately from this out. Then he brought into his mind the power of the spell of the 3 places, and whispered it on the wind, and as he did so, dipped his right forefinger into the horn. Look you now, said he, and further give you heed. Therewith he shook out his forefinger at the ferryman, to cause heeding and remembrance in him, and it happened that, with the shaking, a drop of the water fell on the ferryman's forehead. The place that he came to on the 3rd day was the wood of Mon, said he. It was the wood of Mon, by the power of the gods that dwelt there. Sleep and all sweet scent and dimness were blown away in an instant from the face of the lake. The feather shone again in the air to the south and east of them, and the boat turned of its own will to follow it. Ah, said the ferryman, sighing, the story is known to thee. We will go forward. And well it was that the story was known to me, thought Goody, and well it was to the wood of Mon that he came. They went forward in silence until the sky was aflame with the sunset behind them, and the feather gleamed pale like a rising star in the opal dimness of the east. The ferryman stopped his rowing and fell to musing and cogitation. "Wherefore stay you your rowing?" said Gurry. "Considering I was," said the ferryman, "seeking remembrance of what island it was you left before you came to the Lake of Bargod." "It was the Island of the Mighty," said Gurry. "If you come from that island," said the ferryman, "I should desire to learn from you tidings concerning a kinsman of mine that dwelt there in the days of the Emperor Arthur, if you know any." "What name was with your kinsman?" "Clust," said the ferryman. "Clust fab Clustfeineth. Truly, he was a musician. If he were buried 50 cubits beneath the earth, he could hear the ant when she rose from her nest in the morning, as far as from Gelliwick in Cornwall to Penblathain in North Britain. He could hear the dew falling, and the wheat ripening, and the star shining, and the rose breaking into bloom. He could hear the language of the pilchard and the salmon. He could hear the hammer and the chisel of the bee when she builds a storeroom for her plunder from the flowers. Also, he could hear the imagination of the oak tree. Evil be upon me if I refuse to relate to you this story." Thereupon he began it. Music rose up in the east and in the west, and floated and drifted towards them over the pearl-pale water. It came from the roses and gold of the west, as if the sun were harping beyond the brim of the world. Marvellous spells, secret, druidic, mystery-laden music drifted in towards them over the rosy rippling water. It came from the blue dimness of the east, as if night were harping beyond the brim of the world, as if 7 secret enchanters were whispering spells there. Cold, lone whisperings of music, more melodious than dream, drifted in towards them over the wavering turquoise of the water. The ferryman forgot his oar that he might have his 2 hands free for narrating the story. The boat forgot her following the feather and wandered southward with the current. The feather herself forgot her glimmering in the east. The story of Clust was 17 times better than the story of Oll, and the art and skill of the ferryman were 17 times greater in relating it. No words but were linked together with subtle consonance and assonance and rhyme. With the music of his voice, his chanting, the whole lake became slumberous and a mystery. The power in the music for raising slumber was 17 times greater than the power in the scent of the flowers had been. Drowsiness overtook the pallid stars, and the wan sickle of the moon at her rising. "There must be an end of this narrating the story of Clust," thought Gurry Gwaltydene. "He came to Caer Dair Tu, in the cantref of Gwynionnydd, on the 13th day," said the ferryman, "and as soon as he came into the valley of the Caer, he heard music from the harp of Tair Tu." "Woe is me for my birth and pre-existences," said Gurry. "There is no sorrow in the world so keen and bitter to me as the hearing of lies and inaccuracy." The ferryman sighed deeply. "What lies or inaccuracy were you hearing?" said he. "Inaccuracy in the relating of this story," said Gurry. "Heaven knows it was not in Caer Dair Tu, nor in the cantref of Gwynionnydd that he heard the harp, and he did not come there during his whole life, so far as is known. Much less did he come there on the 13th day. Yet it was to a place in Wales that he came, and indeed to 3 places." "I marvel that you should say this," said the ferryman. "What places were they, since it is known to you?" Without concealment or inexactitude, Gurry answered him. It was unlikely that a foster son of Turfliant should have been without knowledge. "The first was the Wood of Mon," said he. "I made known that to you before. Now heed you what the second of them was." He whispered the spell on the wind, and caused the power of it to be like an unseen mist in the air about them. Then he shook out his finger at the ferryman again, to enforce heeding and remembrance of what should be revealed, and with that shook out water from the horn onto his breast. "The second place was a field," said he. "The field of the fountain of Tubai, at Llandibai it was, by the power of the gods that dwell there." In a moment the whole marvel of music went shuddering down and away into silence. The boat turned of its own will to follow the feather that shone now like a little moon low in the heavens eastward. The ferryman picked up his oar from the bottom of the boat and went forward with his rowing. ' The story is known to you already,' he said, and sighed even more sorrowfully than before. During that night they traversed the water in silence, and at dawn there was no land to be seen anywhere, either in front or behind them. At an hour after dawn the ferryman was taken with musing and meditation again, so that he paused in his rowing. ' Wherefore is there pausing ?' said Goody Gwaltyreen. ' Considering and cogitating I was,' said the ferryman. ' Is it from the Island of the Mighty that you come ?'' Indeed it is from the Island of the Mighty,' said Goody. ' It would be better to me than receiving gifts,' said the ferryman, ' and that, though they were generously given by one accustomed to ample bounteousness, and neither stint nor afterthought in the giving, nor expectation of return, if I might obtain news of a kinsman of mine that dwelt in that island in the days of the Emperor Arthur. From that time until now I have heard no tidings of him, and it is unknown to me whether he is alive or dead.' ' What !' said Goody, ' have you 3 kinsmen ?'' I have,' said the ferryman, ' and the third was dearer to me and more gifted than either of the others, and his mind was of a more penetrating quality. Drem, the son of Dremidud, was the name with him,' said he. ' He was an astronomer. When the gnat arose in the morning with the sun, Drem could see her from the top of Penguaid in Cornwall to the bottom of Dinsol in the north, and furthermore he could easily count the hairs of her beard. Of a winter's night when the sky was cloudiest, it would be easy to him to count the stars of heaven, both the brighter and the dimmer ones.' While he was talking, the air above the lake bloomed out into flowers lovelier of aspect than the wild March daffodil, than the foxglove of Garth Maelor, than the blossom of the meadowsweet beside the river, than the frail white wood anemone beside the meadow fountain. The waters about them glowed and burned with the hues of the opal, the ruby, and the amethyst. Faces looked up out of the waves, of such beauty as might blind the eye that beheld them. Faces looked down out of the unclouded sky, whose beauty might have caused strife among the holy Druids of the Gorsedd. The ferryman laid down his oar that he might free his 2 hands for the story. The boat began drifting backwards with the current to the west. 7 times greater was the peril of dreams and forgetfulness then, even than it had been before, on account of the potency of the faces in the waves and in the sky, and of the slumber-laden spell in the blossoms. ' Indeed, indeed,' thought Goody, ' there must be preventing this relating the story of Dramfad Dremidud.' ' Listen you now while I make this known to you,' said the ferryman. ' Accurately and with extreme veracity shall it be told.' He chanted it with such bardic skill as made the skill he had used before seem mere ignorance and uncouth narration. ' From Gelliwick,' said he, ' Drem could, in a twinkling, shoot the wren between the 2 legs upon Esger Oerfel in Ireland, and that either by day or by night, either with eyes open or with eyes closed.' ' Woe is me !' said Goody. ' What sorrow is this wherewith I am afflicted ?'' What sorrow is it ?' asked the ferryman. ' Accurate veracity you promised me in the narration of this story, and what you are saying is but half true and half untrue.' ' It seemed to me that it was true,' said the ferryman mournfully. ' It is not true,' said Goody. ' Not from Gelliwick could he shoot the wren. His eyesight was not equal to that.' ' From whence was it that he could shoot her, in Heaven's name ?' said the ferryman. ' From a place in Wales it was. Indeed, from 3 places. He was such a one that it would have been beneath his dignity to have travelled in other lands. It is a marvel to me that you should not have known this.' ' I knew it not,' said the ferryman. ' What places were they ?' The first and the second I have made known to you before. They were the wood of Mon and the field of Tybai at Llandybai in Iskennon. Marvellous is your power at forgetting." Then he dipped his finger again, making the power of the spell. "Heed now what the third place was," said he, and shook out his finger to enforce it, causing water from the fountain to fall upon the crown of the ferryman's head. "It was the Wyddfa mountain in Gwynedd and in Arfon that it was," said he, "and in the 4 quarters of the world there is not the equal of it, and hath not been, and will not be, throughout the age of ages. The Wyddfa mountain it was, by the power of our father Hugh Gadarn, that dwells there." "Those were the 3 places," said he. "Heed you them and remember, and it shall be the better for you while you remain alive. The wood, the field, and the mountain." "Alas!" sighed the ferryman, "this is also known to you. We will come to land." End of Part 21. Part 22 of The Fates of the Princes of Dyfed by Kenneth Morris. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The story of Rhianon and Pryderi, the second branch of it called The 3 Unusual Arts of Tyrynion and Gurigwal Tyreen, and the Freeing of the Birds of Rhianon. 5. The Spell of the Wood, the Field and the Mountain, and the Freeing of Adan Fuinach at last. It was midday between dawn and noon when Guri landed and set forth to journey over sunlit hills and valleys of apple trees. An orchard vaster than any in the world at that time, and if vaster, more beautiful. It was the peculiarity of the trees that they were adorned with clouds of bloom, the white bloom and the pink, and not only bloom, but green young apples, and furthermore, ruddy golden fruit, such as even the unhungry and ungluttonous would desire. Amidst them the linnet flitted perpetually, and ouzels gifted with supernatural song, and the missel thrush perched on the branches, strewing penillion. There would be lawns and valley bottoms beauteous with a million daffodils, and beneath the trees flaming hosts of the crocus, purple and white and saffron. Such beauty and delight have hardly been made known to the eye of man at any time. On among the apple bloom, through the bird music, the feather drifted shining, and beauty and music increasing, with every step that he took following it. When the sun was nearing the west of heaven, he came to the edge of the orchard and looked down over a soft lawny valley, not deep. Beyond it rose a palace glowing against the sunset, that had the appearance of being built of the rose pearl and the mellow topaz. On the lawn before the palace were 100 youths and 100 maidens. Their laughter was without loudness or harshness, their motions fairer than the motions of the swan upon the lake, statelier than the motions of the crane in the marshland. The least and worst of them was equal in grace and beauty to the best of the family of Gwynab Nudd, who ride the night winds and the water foam among the mountains, and enjoy unbroken beauty and merriment until the day of doom. With dignified courtesy they met him, and greeted and praised him, commenting upon the fame and noble lineage of the men of the Island of the Mighty, and desiring it would please him to quit wandering and abide there with them in delight from that out. They led him towards the door of the palace. "For the feast will be prepared," said they. At the door, as he was going in with them, the feather of Adan Fuinach lighted down in his breast, and he knew that the bird herself would be within. Richer and more beautiful was everything that he saw there than anything he had attained seeing until then. Never should the footsole fall upon the flagstone by reason not of strewn rushes, but of rich skins of the bear and the beaver, of beautiful skins from the east and west of the world. Never should the eye behold the wall by reason of armour carven of the amethyst and the diamond, and of priceless hangings of silk and taffeta adorned with stories of Caigant, Gwynford, and Abred, the 3 circles of the world. On the dais at the head of the hall the King of Caerhedd was enthroned. His throne was of sun-kindled amethyst, and the mere setting eyes on it was equal in satisfaction to having 7 ships of wealth and merchandise in the harbour, after their wandering the wide waters and meeting with neither harm nor loss. On his head was a crown with 9 proud acorns of polished diamond in it, the least of which, for pure beauty, was beyond the evening or the morning star. There was more satisfaction in looking at the crown than in winning 7 victories over war-wise sovereigns. As for the King himself, there was no one in the hall that was the equal of him, or nearly the equal of him, either for an aspect of serene dignity, or for handsomeness of visage, or for the knowledge of weaving spells, or for the power and peril of them when they were woven. Here is the likeness of him, so far as it may be given. His hair and beard were long and curling, and yellower than the outer petals on the bloom of the daffodil. His voice was more harmonious, and of sweeter modulation than the coo and croon and rippling murmur of a runlet amid the rushes in a peaty field on the mountain. His dark and starry eyes were now bright with a laughter beyond sound, now far and dimly glimmering with quietude and dreams of arcane magical beauty. But if it should be thought that there was a cage above his throne, and Adenfuinach imprisoned in it, false that thought would be, for there was no cage there. The whole hall was melodious with bird music, as if there were 1,000 and such as she there. And indeed, unnumbered, twinkling, jewel-luminous birds were flitting and sweeping and gleaming among the rafters, keeping alive their rich, harmonious, dream-wild confluence of sounds continually. They were all of them equal in beauty to the birds of Rhianon. No one would have known if Muinach were among them or not. "The greeting of the god and man to the King of Caerhedd," said Guri Gwaltairine. "The best of greetings and the kindliest of welcomes to you also," said the King. "As long as you remain in the Caer there shall be courtesy and entertainment, feasting and music for you, and when the gifts are given to the guests in the morning, they shall be in your hands at the beginning, and neither on the 3rd day nor in the 3rd year will it be asked of you to make known the nature of your quest." "May it be requited to you for this courtesy," said Guri. "Less than fitting would it be were I not to make it known to you now. I come here as an ambassador from Tubai, the daughter of Hugh from the well at Llandubai, in quest of Adenfuinach, the bird of Rhiannon. Her music is the passing of the heart from its bondage, the fulfilment of the ultimate concerns of the soul, and therefore it is an ill thing for the island of the mighty to be without her." "There are 1,000 birds whose music is that, and more than that," said the King. "We have never heard even a rumour of Adenfuinach." "It is the place where falsehood is spoken," thought Guri. Thereupon they sat down to meat. "Let the place of the King's heir of Caerhedd be given to this chieftain of the Cymry," said the King. "Let every one that opens and shuts the eye, and every one that beholds the light, show him respect and serve him. Let not collops cooked and peppered be lacking to him." The feasting went forward, and Guri in the place of the King's heir, opposite to the King. Neither among the foster sons of Tairnion Turf Fliant, nor in the court of the crowned King in London, when the chief bards and princes of the island of the mighty were gathered there. Neither in Europe, nor in Africa, nor in the islands of Corsica, had he seen food of such delicate aspect so well served in such beautiful food vessels. Always, during the feasting and conversation, the birds amidst the rafters strewed forth their low, sweet, harmonious utterance, neither so loud as to break across the spoken word or the laughter, nor so quiet as not to come between those and silence, and adorn every one of them with such adornment as the foxglove has from the mountain hedgerow, or the green shore-wave from the gleaming sand before, and the glittering, unstable, purple-running blueness behind it, or the turquoise stones of Asia from their place in the bronze brooch of a war-loving king, or the song of the blackbird at dawn-time from the motions of the breeze amid the sun-dappled leafage in the green and wildwood palaces of May. The King of Caerhedd looked at Guri and saw that he left the best of the food untouched. That was vexation to the King, by reason of the magical subtleties in the food. Whoever might eat it, it would cause forgetfulness in him of the places where he had played in his boyhood, and of the faces that had been about him in the world. ' What troubles the mind of the foster son of Rhianon ?' said he. ' What troubles the mind of the Prince from Iniswen? The most delicate food is as little desirable to you as chaff and stubble from the fields of September after the harvest.' ' Excellent it is, truly,' said Goody Gwaeltairinn. ' There will hardly be the equal of it in the Island of the Mighty, much less in the rest of the world. Even the scent of it would be contentment for the hungry. Thinking and considering I was, not accusing the food. Unless the thought were made known to us, we should deem that the food was unpleasing to you.' Then Goody began to prepare in his mind the spell of the three places. First he mused upon the secrecies of the Wood of Mon, where Math Fab Mathunwi engages in enchantments for the purification of the world. He thought of the bluebells there, that are endowed with supernal deep thought by the immortals, and their ponderings maintain the science of the holy ovates of the Corseth. By reason of his possessing the spell of the wood, the field, and the mountain, he was able to let loose about him, with a word, the whole power of their meditations, and to put compulsion with it upon things animate and inanimate, and to ward off spells and harm. ' Last October I travelled in the north,' said he. ' The leaves of the oaks were falling and blown hither and yonder along the floor of the forest, drifting and whispering on the wind. It was in my mind to cogitate and muse upon the learning I heard from them. Until I obtain knowledge of the meaning of it, I shall take little pleasure in food.' ' It might well be that we could give you the knowledge,' said the King. ' Make known to us where you were travelling when you heard them.' ' By the Wood of Mon,' said Goody. ' By the Wood of Mon.' With that word a sigh passed through the hall, softer and sadder than the whispering of the west wind through the dry reeds and the sandhills of Tyvi on the first evening of autumn, when the sun is going down behind rain grey clouds over island. ' Let the food be taken away,' said the King. ' Let drinking horns be brought, adorned with silver and opals, and mead in goblets of crystal and pearl.' They brought them. The foam on the mead in the hurless and the goblet was whiter and brighter than the foam on the ninth wave when it rises against the black rocks of Gubert and breaks against them and shakes out its long white glimmering mane against the blackness. The mead was of the colour of the sunlight through topaz and amber. There was a sound in it like the murmur of bees through the lime groves and orchards, and a scent of all the flowers in the world, of heather and roses, of apple bloom and daffodils and pansies. If there were potent spells in the food, 10 times more potent and subtle were the enchantments in the drink. There was peril for the mighty, the careful, the well-governed in every drop that shone in the wonderfully carven, jewel-adorned goblets and hurless horns. ' For what reason is this abstinence on the Lord of the Brithen?' said the King of Caerhead. ' The mead in the hurless was brewed from honey 9 times sweeter than the honey of the virgin swarm in the heatherlands of the Island of the Mighty, and there was neither scum nor bees in it. The mead has this peculiarity, that whoever drinks even a little of it dreams what he desires to dream, and remembers what he desires to remember, and is made certain of the attainment of whatever he may seek.' ' Excellent is the mead, truly,' said Goody Gwaeltairinn. ' Only fools would accuse it. The sight and the scent of it alone would be the multiplying of thirst and the quenching of the thirst they multiplied. It was thought that had overtaken me, thought and cogitation.' Then he prepared the second power of the spell, musing upon the secrecies of the field at Llandybie, and the golden kingcups that grow there, endowed by a company of immortals with a spirit of swift, shining, and certain wisdom, so that by their mere blossoming they breathe out spiritual delight upon the air, and maintain the inspiration of the bards of the holy Gorsedd. Yes, indeed, I was troubled by cogitation and inquiry into secret things,' said he.
Alas, said the King of Caerheth, unless we know the matter of the cogitations, we shall deem that it is an accusation against the mead. I will make it known for your satisfaction, said Goody. A week ago I was travelling in the south, and I came by a place where the bees were raising song and monody among the marsh marigolds. The weight of the news I heard from them was brought to my mind by the scent of mead. Until I obtain knowledge of the meaning of it, I shall get no delight out of drinking. It might well be that we could give you the knowledge, said the King. By what place were you travelling in the south? By the field of Llandubai, said he. By the wood and the field. Hardly were the words out of his mouth when a sigh passed through the hall, softer and sadder than the rustling of yellow leaves and the dropping of mist-drops from them in the evening when the wildwood is all a pale and ghostly flame in October, and the mists over the mountains and valleys of the world. Let the mead be taken away, said the King of Caerheth sorrowfully. Then the chief bard of the Caer stood forth and began to relate a story. Such was the nature of its assonance and consonance, and its perfection of melodious sound, and its clarity in the depiction of heroic men and actions, and marvellous places, that even the stories of Ol, the son of Olwith, and Clust fab Clustfeineth, and Drem, the son of Dremidid, seemed dull and worthless in its comparison. When he had made an end of it, the King of Caerheth said, For what reason is this abstraction and lack of delight in hearing stories on the King's son from the Island of the Mighty? By relating tales such as this, the bards maintain bloom and fruitage on 1,000,000 trees, and spread unfading beauty over the 7 cantrevs of Caerheth. Yet it was no better with you hearing it than would be hearing a crow calling among the yellow elms on an autumn morning, or the voice of the corncrake in the valley on the night of the full moon of the hay harvest. Wonderful was the story, truly, said Goody Gwaeltaidin. Better would not be told in the Island of the Mighty or in Ireland, much less in the rest of the world. Considering and meditating I was, not accusing the story. The cogitations of my own mind had overtaken me. Then he began preparing the last power of the spell. He remembered the Withfa mountain, the summit of the world, the house of Hugh Gadarn. He bethought himself of the snow on the peak of the Withfa, and the pure nature of it, and the endowment it had of spiritual might from the immortals, whereby is enhanced the spirituality in the hearts of the holy Druids of the Sacred Circle. Owing to his possession of the spell of the 3 places, he was enabled to speak as if it were from the Withfa, and to wield the lonely and lofty power. Alas, that we know not the matter of the cogitations, said the King. I will tell you, said Guri. Last year when I travelled in Arfon, although there was snow, I heard an ouzel singing. What with the blackness of his wing, and the whiteness of the snow, and the mysterious nature of the learning in the verses of the song, I have had little freedom from cogitation from that time until now, and until I learn the meaning of them, I shall get no satisfaction either out of song or story. Unless we knew the place where you heard the ouzel, we could not interpret it for you, said the King. By what place were you riding? By the Withfa mountain, said Goody. By the wood, the field, and the mountain. With the utterance of the words of the spell, and their regally leaping from between his teeth, and driving their glory and stern resonance through the hall, the magic of the King withered, the music of the birds amid the rafters was hushed, and a sigh went through Caerheth, sadder than the cheeping of the robin in December, when there is no gleam in the greyness of heaven, and no dry place on earth for the footsole of man. Care and lack of ease took the mind of the King. Unknown to him until then was the failure of his spells. Wonderful is the might of this Druid-taught youth from the island of Hugh Gadarn, thought he. Then he betook himself to considering whether there would be any means of overcoming and putting spells on him. Unless it would be through delight and forgetfulness coming upon him with the wheel of his own speech and song, there will be no means, thought he. Will it please you to give us full news of what you heard from the leaves and from the bees and from the ouzel? Said the king. It is well known to us that there are no songs in the world to equal the songs of the Cymry, and no stories comparable to the stories of the island of Britain. If I had a harp I would sing them, said Goody Gwaeltairn. They are not of a nature to be related, except in song. Thereupon they brought a harp and set it before him, and he began to get music out of it, and made these verses and sang them to the music. The fall of the leaves in the woods of the world, and the heart in me grieves, where they drift and are whirled, for the silence of her in the springtime, whose wings are enrainbowed, empearled. And where is the might in the limbs of the tree, and his dreams of delight and imaginings free? It's he longs for thy songs, Adan Fuinach, shaken out o'er the hills and the sea. For the 3 pearls of singing were lost from the land, they were fairies far winging, the winds that were fanned by the fall of their wings were enroiled. By what craft were ye stolen, by what hand? Shall I multiply words without ending the wrong, from the midst of the birds that have held thee so long, by the wood that thou knowest, O Muinach? Come, princess of beauty and song. When he had sung as much as that, he looked up, and saw that the birds had lighted down where they might among the rafters, and covered their heads with their wings. All but one of them, and she the most beautiful of all, and her plumage like the rainbow, like the clouds of sunset and dawn. She had been songless and hidden during the whole time of the feast, but now she was circling through the air uneasily, and fluttering to and fro there. Now I will sing to you the news I had from the bees at Llandybie, said he. Then he made these verses and sang them. There's a field mid the mountains, and streams have their rise there, in the diamond of fountains, spell hidden from men's eyes there. And the bees in the cuckoo flowers heed it, and ponder and dream and grow wise there. And I heeded much yearning, their murmur and croon, and the drift of their learning, a wandering tune. And here's what I heard, Adan Fuinach, by the fountain of Tubai in June. There was one without rest from her beating of wings, in a silence unblessed, in a palace of kings, that had stirred not from sloth since the 3 shouts woke life in the voidness of things. But westward and westward ere this she is winging, and a queen turneth restward, heart healed by her singing. For war amidst peace done enspelled her. Heed thou too this gift of my bringing. This gift of small words, wherein all powers abound, so that stars, seas, and birds must submit to their sound, and rivers and islands and forests, yea, and man and his steed and his hound. And is there no lurement in this then for thee? Was the white-winged, the pure, meant in loneness to be? By the wood and the field of the fountain, O Muinach, thou too shalt be free. When he had sung as much as that, the bird that had been silent slanted down suddenly through the air, and lighted on the helmet of a group of armour that hung high on the wall above the king's throne. No one heeded her except Goody, and that by reason of the magic he had been slowly weaving about them with his song, and with the first 2 words of the spell, and with the rich heroic glory of his voice in the singing, and with his unequalled bardic skill with the harp. Now I will sing you what I heard from the blackbird of the Withfor mountain, said he, and with that went to the harping again, and made these verses and sang them. There is a mountain in Wales where an ouzel is biding, and I heeded the tales from his bill that came gliding, that so I might pierce the enchantment, and find thee in thy fairyland hiding. 'Twas of one that was cumbered by dreams without light, in oblivion she slumbered the long barren night, till with peace amidst war for a weapon I gave back the sun to her sight. Yea, their bonds are outworn, thy bright sisters are free, they may wing through the morn, they may sing o'er the sea. Wilt thou leave them to droop in the sunlight, with sadness of mourning for thee? For the sake of the queen, in whose service of old ye went dazzling in sheen,
of dawn glory and gold, by the wood and the field and the mountain, ah, come forth, glamour ensouled. With that, remembrance burst onto Aden Fuinach. The beauty of the hall and the lawn lands seemed to her to be nothing. The birds that had been her companions since she was stolen were no better to her than a flock of starlings on a morning in April. Their music that had enchanted and put shame and silence and dreams of pleasure on her during all those years seemed only the loud converse of starlings when they may be chattering and quarrelling over the things that concern them. She bowed her beautiful crowned head beneath her wing. Sorrow and remorse were upon her. She had much delight, she remembered, in the place of her enchantment, and no memories of Rhianon, her lady. That was by reason of the spells that had been put upon her, and their being 10 times stronger than the enchantments of Aden Lanach and Aden Lonach. As for the men of Caer Heth, they were beyond heeding her. Power and magic had faded from them. They only remembered the ages of the world and the toil of the gods, and their own life without warfare or labour. Glory they had never earned. Time was taking from them the semblance of it that they had cherished. But as for Goody himself, he did not stay in his singing. The great power of song had come upon him. The wheel of the bards was filling his soul, as the wind fills and drives the sails of a ship. He saw that Aden Fuinach had awakened from her dreams. He saw her bow her crowned head. He knew that in a little while song would come to her, and she would go forth singing before him. He sang these verses to restore her. For I saw in my dreams in the halls of her sire one crowned with sunbeams and engirdled with fire. She was brighter than dawn is in summer, more lovely than dawn her attire. And I saw her again, where high pity had brought her. She was compassed with pain, she, a goddess's daughter. And wilt thou not come, Aden Fuinach, to make end of the wrong that was wrought her? Was she queen of the world, or the realms of the air? Where the sea foam is whirled, was her sovereignty there? And what might was enkindled against her, that her world was made barren and bare? Speak thou, hast thou known? Is it given thee to know what so dimly was shown when my dreams were aglow? By the wood and the field and the mountain, oh sing thou the end of her woe. Thereupon the beautiful wings of Aden Fuinach were spread, and beat down on the air beneath her, and she rose in her glory singing. Her song was incomparable. True was that saying that it would be the passing of the heart from its bondage, the fulfilment of the ultimate concerns of the soul. It was 7 times more melodious than the singing either of Lanach or Lonach. As she sang, here is what happened. The men of Caer Heth rose up, and their king with them. They remembered the dawn of the world, when the blessed ones went forth from Gwynfryd, and they went not forth with them. They remembered that they had chosen delight then, and now their delight was withered. But Aden Fuinach sang and sang. Then there rose up a star, and purple brilliance in the far part of the hall. It was a god. The harp in his hands was brighter than the sun. Guri heard him sing this verse to the men of Caer Heth. O ye that not stirred when ye heard our Hyaton, when first the dark world of Abred we trod, when for warward attire the flame plumes we wrapped on, and chaos caught fire with the radiance of God, will ye dream here in peace, while the death fumes encumber your brethren that went forth of old time and fell? Shall ye sweep not in aid to those stars dimmed in slumber, those heroes enchained in oblivion and hell? And he heard the men of Caer Heth answer him with this one.
O bright one, flame-plumed, what fate hath o'erborne them? What dark power hath doomed them these slumber-wrought chains? They were brave, though they heard not our wise words who warned them. Ah, say not the glow of their sun-brightness wanes. Ah, we too that sought not high Caigan's surrender, that quested no perilous heaven for our hold,
We too have seen wane our old cherished splendour, and delight hath turned pain, and the whole world grown cold.
And he heard these verses again from the beautiful immortal. They rode forth from bliss in the world's golden morning, when the lone bardic stars sang hymns in their praise. The insignia of gods were their proud brows adorning. The waste of night glowed as they passed on their ways. What though, while through hell's self their war way they winged on, in age's oblivion o'erladen they fell? It was Gwynford they deemed too inglorious a kingdom. It was they that made choice to build new heavens in hell. There be some that o'ercome when the deep rose to slay them, and flame against flame waged high war with night, leagued chaos and hell without might to dismay them, nor subtly wrought spell that might dim their proud sight. The ranks of the warrior gods shine with their glory. They turn from delight to their stern age-long war, lest the brightness at heart of the ages grow hoary, and the spirit's sun rise o'er the world's brink no more. And again, the men of Caerheth, the gods without toil, answered him.
Our peace hath grown old like a flower past its bloom time, and one-rimmed and cold hath fallen low on the ground. And we gird us with swords and go forth to our doom time, to free them that fell, or ourselves to lie bound. Ah, ye, on whose dark brows long pain and compassion have kindled sad splendours of star flame to crown, we, the pure ones unstained with the long moil of passion, to your godhood war-worn and war-glorious bow down.
End of part 22. Part 23 of The Fates of the Princes of Dyfed by Kenneth Morris. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The story of Rhianon and Pryderi. The third branch of it, that is to say, the return of Pryderi. 1. The peculiarities of the ring, and the fillet of the family of Dyfed, and the 3 primitive bards of the Island of the Mighty. Tubai rose up, glimmering darkly, out of her fountain, when he came to the field of Llandybie on the evening of the 3rd day. Her aspect was even sterner than it had been before. "Wherefore come you?" said she. "Adan Fwynach is made free from the sorceries," he answered. "Yes, is she made free," said Tubai. "Pryderi fab Bwyll freed her. Unless I obtain service from you, I shall never be requited for the loss of the water." Guri marvelled in his mind. It seemed to him that it would have been he himself that freed Adam Fwynach, but it would have been unfitting for him to have spoken of it. "Whatever service you may require of me," he said, "it will be an honour to me to perform it." "It will be the succouring of my kinswoman, Rhiannon Ferch Hevaidh," she said. "From dawn to dusk her place is at the palace gate in Arberth, doing the least just penance in the world, and her enemies plotting against her continually. Pryderi, her son, will be going forward to save her, but so many will be against him that it is not known whether he would obtain success without aid." "I never had any desire in my life equal to my desire to do this," said he. "I will ride forward now, and storm the palace in the morning." "Misfortune often overtakes the rash," said she. "It will be better to remain here until dawn. There would be no seeing by night the feathers that are to guide you." Thereupon she gave him the feathers, one from each of the birds. "Follow the white one when the blue is lost," she said, "and the rainbow-coloured when there may be no recovering the white. By the time that you have parted with the rainbow-coloured, it will be a marvel if you are not within sight of Arberth." With that she melted into the glow and gloom of the dusk. He lay down by the well, the beauty of the stars a tent for him. Scarcely had his eyelids fallen over his eyes when he heard voices and conversation from the road. The voices were so melodious that no music in the world would be equal to them. "Is there any cure for old age?" said the first of them. Is there any making the weak limbs strong and taking whiteness from the hair and the deep furrows from about the eyes and the mouth?"
"There is," said the second, "if one could find Pryderi Fapul."
Then the third of them said,
"How would he accomplish it?"
"With the peculiarities of the fillet of the family of Hevaith Hen from the country of the Immortals," said the second. "Put news of them on the wind, Lord Brother," said the first.
"Rhianon his mother brought it with her from the palace of Hevaith
at the time she came into the island of the mighty. She bound it about the swaddling clothes of Pryderi on the day that he was born. Would there be using the fillet without knowledge of spells?"
"There would not, and even with the spell of the three places there would be no using it, unless the secret of it were made known to him."
It was the third of the voices that said that. "I will tell you," said the second voice. "There was a family that loved delight and beauty, and had not bestirred themselves, nor won any victories since the morning of the three shouts. He came to them and caused them to become eager for the battle of the world, and to reward him for this I shall make it known to him in the morning." Gurri considered within himself. It was not in his power to rise up or question the voices. "The fillet was about my swaddling clothes when I was found," thought he. "Beyond that, there is knowledge of the spell of the three places. The men of Caer Hedd were such a family as was spoken of." He took the fillet from his breast where he wore it. Never had he been without it during his life. It might well have peculiarities with it, he thought. He fell to musing upon the fillet, and from musing to sleep. How long he might have been sleeping is not known. When he heard the voice again and listened, it was still beyond his power either to rise or to turn his head, or to question them.
"Lord Brother," said the
third voice, "if there were in the Island of the Mighty any giving sight to the blind, it would be one of the priceless, wonderful gifts of the island." "There is such a gift," said the first. "It is with Pryderi Fapul."
"Put news of it on the wind, Lord Brother," said the second.
"He would do it with the spell of the wood, the field, and the mountain," said the first, "and by means of the peculiarities of the ring of the family of Hevaith Hen."
"Is that ring with him also?" said the second.
"Rhiannon his mother threaded it on a golden thread and tied it about his neck on the morning when he was born. The ring was inscribed in the Coilbren letters of the bards. Bodhi the Chwelid."
"And a return there shall be for him," said the third voice. "There was a family that dwelt in confusion and turmoil and hideous sound. They had been at senseless warfare since the crying of the name. He came to them and caused music to be heard in their care, and brought harmony there, so that now they are doing service for the Immortals on the borders of space. To requite him for this, I shall appear to him in the evening, and cause the path of his returning to be clear before him."
"I will tell you," said the first voice. "I shall cause the secret of curing blindness to be known to him. I shall appear to him at noonday and make it clear. There was a care wherein there was a heavy sloth and unbreakable slumber, and he brought the brightness of day and clear vision there. It is to requite him for this that I shall appear to him and make known the secret of the ring."
"He is the song bringer," said the second voice, "and therefore I shall aid him."
"He is the light giver," said the first, "and therefore I shall reward him."
"He is the hero," said the third, "and therefore I also shall be with him."
Gurri put his hand in his breast and touched the ring that he still wore there on the golden thread on which it was threaded when he was found in the stall of Flamwen, the Mayor of Tyrrhenion. "All this is a marvel to me," thought he, and desired the more that Pryderi might become known to him. "There might be peculiarities with this ring also," he mused, "and the one inscription in the Coilbren inscribed on it, and on the ring of the family of Hevaith that is with the son of Puel." From musing upon the ring he fell asleep. The sky was abloom with dawn tulips when he awoke. No memory of the voices remained with him at that time, but it chanced that he had the fillet in his right hand, and his forefinger thrust through the ring, and when his eyes fell on those two adornments it seemed to him that there was magic quickening in them, and elemental being. They flashed suddenly in the sunlight, as far as from Betws Mountain to Dynefawr. He threw the feather of Adonlonach into the air, according to the counsel Tubai had given him. A wind from the east took it and bore it on, and he rode forward, following it through the valleys and over the hills of the great Cantref till mid-morning. Then he saw it drop by the roadside, and at a word from him, away with the wind-driver at his swiftest to the place where it fell. Here is who Goody saw there, an old infirm man sitting by the hedge. The flesh of his face and hands was withered, yellow, and with 1,000 wrinkles. His back was bent double with age, he was grievously afflicted with coughing, his hair was as white as the wind-driven foam. "The greeting of heaven and man to you, Pryderi fab Pwyll," said the old man. Sorrow upon me, thought Goody Gwalt Eirene, a moon of memory suddenly shining forth in his mind. If I heard not such a voice as that in my dreams in the night. "The greeting of heaven and of man to you also, and better to you than to me," said Goody, "and no worse with you, because Goody Gwalt Eirene is the name to name me with, and not Pryderi fab Pwyll." "Many times would it be worse," said the old man. "It would be the continuance of the burden of old age, when youth might be had for the asking from Pryderi." "Could he accomplish that indeed?" said Goody. "Could he restore youth to the ancient?" "Yes, he could restore it," said the old man. "He has the golden fillet of the family of Hevaith Hen in the country of the immortals, and therein there is restoring youth to the ancient, and strength to the worn-out limbs, and furthermore blackness to the hair that has grown white these years." "I marvel at this," said Goody. "Make known to me in Heaven's name, if it please you, the manner of restoring youth with the fillet." Yes, will I make it known," said the old man. "Pryderi would set the fillet on my head, and he would repeat spells, and he would order the hair to assume its natural colour, the black to be black, the brown brown, and the golden golden, and he would command the limbs to regain their former youth and vigour, as if the years had never passed over them. And in my deed he would put compulsion upon them all, and they would obey him." Well, in my deed, a marvel is this, truly," said Goody. "Would he put compulsion upon them in this way?" said he. He took his own fillet from his breast and set it on the white hair of the old man, and as he did so, said, "By the wood, the field, and the mountain, forsake whiteness, every hair of you, and assume your natural colour. Let the black be black, and the brown brown, and the golden golden, and let the limbs regain their former vigour and youth, as if the years had never passed over them." Would he command them and put compulsion upon them in that way? said Goody. But before the other could answer him, it was as if a wind arose and blew the old age from him. He stood forth there by the roadside, young and strong and handsome, one to be feared by the hostile, one to be loved by many. By heaven, he would put the compulsion on them in that way, said he. His laughter rang out through the valley. Except the sun in heaven, nothing was so bright and golden as the hair upon his head. "It is a good fillet enough, and excellent peculiarities in it," he said, giving it back to Goody. "It is a marvel if it be any other than the fillet of the family of Hevaith Hen." With that he raised his two hands towards the sky, and golden and roseate flames leapt up from the earth and played and circled about him. Goody watched him in delight and wonder. As the flame rose, so he increased in stature, till he had the height of pines and poplars with him. They leapt and played about the glory of his head, and took the form of soaring eagles of golden fire. Innumerable harps sounded out of the invisible air. Their music was such as gods desire to hear when they move combatward in their burning cars. On his two hands were two marvellous gloves. It seemed as if even the puny wearing them might easily pluck up Pumlumon. A blue cloak of immortal bardhood was on his shoulders. It was as if woven of the fire of the sapphire, the turquoise, and the amethyst. Higher and higher the flame circled and blossomed, and he rose with it into the air. As soon as he overtopped the mountains, the form and beauty of him changed. Wings of excessive glory branched out on this side and on that, and he became a dragon of flame against the blue brightness of the firmament, soaring and flaming and circling, his eagles like stars scintillant around him, his music waning from the world. He ascended resplendently into the empyrean. Then the two glories of the sky were made one. The dragon was lost in the brilliance of the morning sun. "It was Gurom Brithfav," said Goody. "In my deed it was the heartener of heroes. Marvellous is my good fortune this day to have held converse with such a one." Since the blue feather was lost, he put the white one on the wind, and mounted Gyrwr Gwyntoedd slowly, and rode forward after the feather, deep in his meditations. As for old age and the restoration of his youth to him, never would he have needed the services of anyone for that. The immortals grow not old, they assume what guise will please them at any time. So he rode on musing. For what reason will the Prithfav have appeared to me, he wondered. At noonday, a mile from him along the road, he saw a blind man coming towards him slowly, tapping the ground with his stick. Immediately a gust took the feather and whirled it away till it fell like a star into the breast of the blind man's coat. Away with the wind driver with that, leaving the wind behind him. The blind man had not taken the 10 steps after receiving the feather before Gurry and the wind driver had come up to him. "The greeting of heaven and of man to you, Pryderi fab Pwyl Penanwn," said the blind man. "May it be better to you than to me," said Gurry, "and none the worse if the name with me is Gurry Gwaltaireen. If this be true, it is the sorrow of my life. More than anything I desire to meet with Pryderi fab Pwyl, and that on account of the service he would do for me." "I would do you service, if it were in my power to," said Gurry. "What service would Pryderi do for you?" "Sight he would give to my eyes," said the blind man. "He would do it by means of the peculiarities of the ring of the family of Hephaith Hen in the kingdom of the immortals, that has the gift of restoring the blind to their eyesight, and even to seeing better than they saw before they became blind." Gurry dismounted, and took the ring that had been found with him out of his breast. "Marvellous is this indeed," said he. "Make known to me, if it please you, how he would restore eyesight with the ring." "He would touch the eyelids over the eyes that might be afflicted," said the blind man. "It is a marvel to me that anyone should be ignorant of this. He would put the ring on the forefinger of his right hand and touch the eyelids." "Which eyelid would he touch first?" said Gurry. "The right eyelid, as would be natural and fitting," said the other. "Few would dream that it would be the left. And he would put the spell of the 3 places upon the one and the other of them, and command them, and a marvel if they were not obedient." Would he do it in this way? He said, and touched the right eyelid of the blind man with the ring. "By the wood and the field and the mountain, quit you your blindness," he said, and then to the left eye, "By the wood, the field, and the mountain, quit you your blindness also, and neither stubbornness nor cheating with you, either of you, and the sight of the eagle, the god and the dragon to the 2 of you from this out." "By heaven, he would do it in that way," said the other. A wind rose up out of the Isle of Apples and blew the blindness from him. Whatever lack of beauty there had been upon him vanished with it. His 2 eyes became brighter than the eyes of man. They became like 2 gleaming dragons afar, like 2 diamonds kindling in the sun, like the brightness of 2 sea waves when the noonday sunlight is reflected from them. He laughed and looked sunward, and lifted his 2 arms towards the sky. He seemed to draw blueness out of the sky, and a flame out of the ground beneath his feet. His beggar's rags became a blue cloak of bardhood, woven of the fire of jewels, bluer than the bloom of the noonday in June. His body itself wavered and glimmered into intense, gleaming, excellent fire. He lifted his head. It rose to the level of the mountain tops, so great was his stature. Because of his eyes, no one would have known that there were not 3 suns in heaven. Beautiful he appeared, and oh, beautiful and worthy of praise, kindling the silvering gold of the noonlight, kindling the mountains and the valley, the glory of Wales, a meteor out of the firmament of godhood. In the white extreme blazonment of glory about his bardic sunbright head, birds brighter than the lightnings flashed and sang. He had a golden breastplate upon his breast, adorned with the opal, the sapphire, and the diamond. Its peculiarity was the gift of insight, and that no magic should ever prevail against the one wearing it. It was unknown to Gurri whether ever so much beauty had been revealed before, unless it was when Gurron appeared to him in the morning. ' A good ring it is with you,' laughed the god, ' and a marvel if it be not the ring of the family of Dyfed. Useful are its peculiarities.' Laughing, he rose up into the air and assumed the form and glory of the dragon. From the north to the south above the mountains he burned his bright blue, bounteous, vision-giving wings. Beautifully he was poised there for a moment, the proud and arching neck, the quivering, flaming sapphire scales, the head with the aspect of complete vision, wisdom, empire, and command. Away with him, then, into the ether, into the empyrean, to play and kindle and leap forth among the constellations as it might please him. Indeed, indeed, and in my deed, thought Gurri, watching him, fortunate is this beyond any falling of good fortune, to meet Gurron in the morning, and Pleneth before the passing of noon. Pleneth it was, said he. The blind and foolish would have known him. Undoubtedly it was Pleneth, the sight-giver, Pleneth Brith Fard Prydain. Indeed, indeed, fortunate is this. Deep in his musings he rode forward again, setting first the feather of Adenfuinach on the wind to guide him. Indeed, thought he, marvellous revelations are made known to me this day. As for healing blindness, it would not be that Prithfath that would have lost the loss of his vision. Dear and blessed are these immortals, and the hidden reasons they will have for their appearings and vanishings, and for this guise and that they will wear as it pleases them. Then he sang the song that Taliesin ben Barth made at one night old, when Elfin the son of Gwyddno found him in the weir. O faroedd ac o ffynydd, ac o aigian a ffynydd, do dwi dau ddedwydd. And fortunate am I truly, thought he, to whom two gods have appeared in the one day. So musing, he rode forward in a deep and golden content. At sunset he was riding beside the river, and passed the hill of Gorsedd Arberth on his right. He saw that there was a company of men watching on the hilltop, but paid little heed to them. When the darkness came down over the mountains, the feather of Adenfuinach became beautifully luminous before him, and failed not in its guiding him. He rode forward until he came within sight of a city, dim-walled in the light of stars. He saw a man come out of the city and make his way towards him along the road. He had a little harp at his breast that shone strangely. The feather blew towards him and was caught in the harp strings. Gurri rode up to him. "The greeting of heaven and man to you, Pryderi Fabpul," said the harper. "The greeting of heaven and man to you also," said Gurri, "and much better to you than to me, Lord Alorn Brithfav," said he. "What names are these you are putting on me?" said the harper. "I marvel at this." "What names are these you are putting on me?" said Gurri. "Gurri Gwalt Irene my foster parents called me." "And the aspect on you of the one that should be riding to the court of Arberth this night and all," said the harper. "Lord Prithfav," said Gurri. "Lord God," he said, "I am riding thither." "Careless are you in the matter of speech and name-giving," said the harper. "This is a cause for marvelling." "As to name-giving, and as to carelessness therein, the feather will know the one to whom it flies. I met Gurron in the morning, in the guise of an old man afflicted with coughing, and did not know him until he was taking the dragon aspect. I met Plenov at noonday in the guise of a blind man. To both of them the feather flew and rested with them. For that reason, when I meet a harper in the evening and the feather flies to him, it will please me to call him Alorn and God without consultation or waiting for the dragon change to come on him. Therefore, the greeting of the God and the man to you, Lord Alorn Brithfav," said Gurri. Alorn laughed. "Well, well," said he, Would you take advice and counsel from the harper that the feather flew to, whether he had the dragon guise or not?" "Evil upon me if I would not," said Gurry, laughing. "Here is what the counsel will be then," said Alon. "Go forward into Arbeth to the palace, and obtain entry in the name of a craftsman bearing his craft. And when it may be desired of you to make known the nature of the craft, name you the 3 unusual arts." "Gladly I will do so," said Gurry. "Is it known to you what these 3 arts will be?" said Alorn. "It is not known," said Gurry. "Here is what they will be then. Give you heed to them. The first will be restoring youth to the aged. It is known to you how it may be accomplished. The second will be restoring sight to the sightless. Pleneth, my brother, made the secret of it known to you. See that you exercise those 2 arts between the outer portals and the door of the hall." "What will the third art be?" said Gurry. "Make the third known to me also, if it please you." "When they ask you for the third, say you that it will be restoring thrones to their rightful owners." "I will say that," said Gurry, "and I will say, when the Queen asks me, that I saw Alorn Alawan at the gates of her town in the starlight, and that I had counsels from the Prifardd of the Harmonies." "Say it you," said the other, laughing, and stroked his harp strings with his fingers. As he touched them, they gave forth light and immortal melody. Pale green and purple flames rose out of the earth and encompassed him, and it was to be seen that he was indeed the brother of Pleneth and of Guron, not less marvellous than they. He stood there in his body of purple fire, darkly glowing, paling, gleaming, kindling and brightening, his 2 eyes complete in glory and beauty, in the most ancient wisdom, the deepest compassion in the world. "Say it you," he said, laughing, "and let it be known to our sister Rhianon that we, the Prifardd Pryderi, have served her, and will serve her until the end of her sorrows. And now go forward," said he, "and success and advantage be with you according to your desert." Then he too took the guise of the dragon, his body of the fire of the amethyst glowing through the darkness, and his wide beautiful flame wings kindling and flashing, hued like the beryl and the emerald through the gloom. In a moment he too was lost, encompassed in the night amidst the stars. Then Gurry rode forward, and through the gates of Arbeth, and by the silent streets, until he came to the portals of the palace of Pwyll Penannwn. End of Part 23. Part 24 of The Fates of the Princes of Dyfed by Kenneth Morris. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The story of Rhianon and Pryderi. The third branch of it, that is to say, the return of Pryderi. 2. The petulant impatience of Penderyn Dyfed and the maintaining of the sovereignty of Rhianon. Rhianon sat at the palace gate in Arberth. Day after day she had had her place there between dawn and dusk during 20 years. There was no queen's robe on her, no adornment in the world. When she chose the fate of waiting and penance, she acquired the nature of mortality, and knew that there would be no escaping it unless she should go to the gods, or until Pryderi should return. By reason of that, her hair was grey, and the lines of sorrow were on her forehead, and before the 10 years were over she was blind. Yet there was no concealing her majesty. Nothing in fair Dyfed was fairer than she. Her calm, deep, beautiful eyes were bereft of their outward vision, but not of their lone, untroubled glory, not of their colour like the sunlight through the oak leaves on the waters of a deep pool in the forest. Whoever beheld her knew that she was a queen. No one had remained faithful to her when she chose the penance, except Gwawl ap Glud and the 100 men of the Taili of Pwyll Penannwn, with Penderyn Dyfed for Pentaili at the head of them. They had been men in the prime of their worth at that time, not too young to be the best in council, not too old to be the best in war, but the loss of his lord was equal to the taking of 20 years from the life of each one of them, and the penance of their queen had whitened their hair. When she was accused, they were eager to do battle for her, But she forbade them. She would have no warfare until Pryderi or Pwyll Penannon should return. She made a treaty with her enemies on behalf of Pwyll. She would claim no right for herself. She would remain in penance at the palace gate daily, but the throne on the dais should be kept for the king or for his son. As for the governing of Dyfed, it should be in the hands of Pendarren and the Crintach between them, and each with 3 men to uphold him in the council. When Einion ard Cennan heard of this, he rose up in furious impatience. "Are the men of the king's Tylee dead?" said he. "While I live, this wrong shall not be done to the sovereign lady of the Demetians. If she elects to do penance where no penance should be done, let her have praise and honour for it. But in my deed she shall have the name of queen, and she shall have the king's place at the feasts. I will not let sleep come to the eyes of any man until this is granted." "We will humour you," said the Crintach, remembering the furious nature of Einion's onslaught in the conflict, and how he was accustomed to go one against many and drive his foemen into the wave. "The daughter of Hephaith shall have the name of queen between dusk and dawn, and she shall hold the throne on the dais at feast time." Madog and his men were proud enough of that treaty when they made it, on account of the rising of the Tylee in the hall at Einion's words, and the fierce light in their eyes, and the difficulty that Rhiannon had in restraining them. But every year they grew less proud and more impatient over it. With so little between their lord and the kingship, no more than word given to this woman at the palace gate, and she blind and grey after 10 years of it, although she had seemed no older than the king at the time she took on grief and mortality. No more than word was given to her, and the will of those few fierce warriors that were growing older year by year, and if older, fewer also, for by the time that the 20 years were over, there were not more than 29 of them left alive, and Gwawl ap Clud for the 30th. Here is relating now how it came to be that there were so few. During the first 7 years, not one day had passed but that the Queen had had plots and designs to combat in it. The whole power of Clwyd ap Gulcoed set against her. It was marvellous how she might meet and undo all without open warfare, and giving no one reason to accuse her. At times, indeed, her enemies obtained success against her. It was when any of the men of the Tylee had forsaken following her counsel. Every eve of May she would send 10 men to watch on Gorsedd Arberth, and until the 7th year none of those she sent had ever failed in the watching. But it happened then to Einion ard Cennan that 2 days before May Eve he received tidings of the greatest wild boar in the world, that had its haunts on Mynydd Amanw, opposite Carreg Cennan, and was laying waste the whole of the Cantref. The desire of his life came upon him to hunt it, and for that reason he rode away from Arbeth, without the Queen's having knowledge of his going. "Where is the Lord of Iskennan?" said she on the morning of May Eve. "It would be well for him to lead the watchers on Gorsedd Arberth this day." "Hunting the wild boar on Mynydd Amanw he is," said Pendarren Dyfed. "Indeed, alas for that hunting," she answered. "It is the pity of my life that he should have gone to it." The day after news came that Einion had been found slain at the head of the mountain. The boar had slain him when he was parted from his huntsman. Catug Gwaith had come upon him lifeless. Pendarren Dyfed considered within himself. The loss of his lord had been a more grievous burden to Pendarren than to any of the men of the Tylee. His hair was white and his brow furrowed, and he was never heard to laugh. "As for wild boars," said he, "many will be of the nature of swine, that have but 2 legs to go upon. It will be well to consult the Queen." He came to the gate and stood before her. "Lord Pendarren," said she, "the greeting of heaven and of man to you." "And to you also," said he, "and better to you than to me or to any of us. I come for counsel." "Concerning what?" said she. "Concerning the slaying of wild boars," he said. "There was not the better of Einion ard Cennan in Dyfed, except Gwawl ap Clud. Proud and fierce and kindly he was. There was no withstanding him in battle. There was no resisting him at the hearth in the hall." "It is true,"
said Rhiannon, and fitting it would be to say less concerning him.
It appears to me that it would be better for Catug Guthrawl to be slain, said he. He has the nature of a wild boar on him, and I cannot abide these killings by swine.
He shall not die, said she, albeit it is known to me that it was he who slew the chieftain of Iskennan.
Even if you were other than the sovereign lady, I should follow your counsels, said he. Yet there may be a way of appeasing Einion.
What way will it be? Said Rhiannon.
I will not disobey you, said he. Let it be permitted to me to maintain silence concerning this.
Maintain it you, she said. Well known to you are the fruits of rashness.
Yes, said he, and the shadow of laughter on his face. I was 2 days in the basket of Gwaithfydd Nuinog, and it is not unremembered with me.
The next day the chieftains held council. Madog and Dainiel, Catug and Gwiltyn were there, and against them Pendaran Dyfed and Gwawl ap Clud, and Ceredig cum Taivi, and Mairig Mwyn of Bronwydd in the place of Einion. Madog Crintach rose up. It was for the sake of pacifying the Lord of Iskennan, said he, that the throne at the feast times was given to the daughter of Hevaith. For no reason was this but for quieting his turbulent nature. Now that he is slain, let the treaty be kept. There is no sovereign in Dyfed, and no one shall be seated on the throne. Evil was the day on which Arth Kennan was slain, said Pendaran, not heeding him. Were it not for the Queen, I would hunt the boar that slew him, as far as from here to the Sea of Mists, and from the top of Pengwaid in Cornwall to the bottom of Dinsol in the north. Though the boar were greater than the Turk Truith himself, it should come by ill health and extreme weariness, not by death because of me. In my deed to God, said he, were it not for the commands of Rhianon Wren, the sovereign lady of the Demetians, to whom obedience is due, I would be the cause of endless sorrow to that boar. Said Catug Gwaith, heedless are you of the counsel. Truly, there is no queen in Dyfed. It is unfitting to put the title of queen on the daughter of Hevaith Hen. There was the treaty, said Pendaran, turning upon him. She has borne the name on account of the turbulence of Einion. It was not in the treaty. Well, well, and in my deed now, said Pendaran. My mind is lightened of its burden by this. He had his bow strung beside his chair. He took it in his hands now, and drew an arrow from his quiver, as if for diversion merely, and without anger or vehemence. She has no right of queenhood, said he, and did ill to command me. Evil fall upon me unless I hunt that boar. For what reason is this fitting an arrow to the string? Said Madog, and anxiety enough in his voice as he said it. There is no boar here. In my deed there is a boar here, said Pendaran. He was on his feet in a moment, towering over them and dominating them, his aspect regally warlike, menacing. The drawn bowstring at his right shoulder, the shaft aimed between the eyes of Catug. When the arrow hath pierced him, the enchantment will fall from him, and you shall see the swinish nature of yonder man. The Queen ordered you not to shoot, said Catug. Though he had opposed 10 good shields to the arrow of Pendaran, it was well known that the shields would have been pierced, and he himself likewise, without hindering the arrow in its course. For the sake of the Queen, shoot not, said he. Not so, said Pendaran. Thou art a wild boar, and it was no more than the daughter of Hevaith that ordered me. She is the Queen, said Catug. Say you so indeed, said Pendaran, not lowering the shaft. We say it, said the 4 of them. She shall have the throne at the feast. Einion would be appeased now, said Pendaran, when he was making it known to Rhiannon. If he should have to hear what has been gained by it, he would have no sorrow because of being slain. Were it in my power, I would relate it to him in the Gwerddonau Cleon, said she. A magnanimous hero he was. Sorrow upon me that he should have been slain. The story relates that evening a dragon lighted down on the shores of the Gwerddonau Cleon in the magical west of the world. Where is the one that was Einion Arth Kennan? Said the dragon. I am here, said Einion. Sorrow upon me that I am not in Dyfed for the defence of my queen. Sorrow not for it, said the dragon, and related to him what had befallen.
Einion was a stern, silent man at all times, nobly courteous in his demeanour, but few would jest with him, and he with few. Seldom was he heard to laugh, but when he heard the news of that council there was no restraining his laughter until the rising of the sun. 3 years passed after that. At the end of them, the men of the Taili were older and fewer than at the beginning, and it troubled the Crintach more and more daily to see anyone on the throne at feast times, and he was going throneless himself. It happened on the day before May Eve that news came to Ceredig Cal at Boncath that his lordship was being harried by sea demons. I must keep watch upon Penkenais tomorrow night, thought he, but if he should ride back to Arberth to give the news to Rhianon, there would be no keeping watch there. This is a difficult matter, he said. Sorrow upon me if I know which course to take. But in the end he determined to ride forward into Kemais. He knew well that it was on May Eve that the demons would be at their worst. "Where is Ceredig cum Teivi?" said Rhiannon in the morning. "It will be well for him to lead the watchers on Gorsedd Arberth." "News has come from him that he has ridden to Aberteivi," said Gwawl. "The sea demons are troubling his lordship." "Woe is me on account of this," said she. 2 days after, Dainiol the Wicked came into the court. "Pendaran Dyfed," said he, "Ceredig is dead. He was found at the foot of Penkemais at low tide on the morning of the 1st day of May." "Who was it that found his body?" said Pendaran. "It was I," said Dainiol. "It was a night of sea mists, and he would have fallen from the headland." "Evil upon the sea mists," thought Pendaran. "It should be the worse for them." He went out to the palace gate. "It would be well to loose an arrow at Dainiol Drug," said he. "He was ever an enemy of Ceredig, and there is much that is mist-like and treacherous, both in his mind and in his passions. Were an arrow to be loosed and to chance to harm him, there might well be clearer nights upon the coast." "Loose it not," said Rhiannon, "or there would be no hindering warfare." Pendaran went into the council. Gwawl and Meirig went with him, and the lord of Aberdowcledai in the place of Ceredig Calcum Teivi. Now that another of the men of the Taili was slain, and he, Ceredig cum Teivi, the best of the Demesians after Pendaran himself, a man beloved by Pwyll Penannan, and holding high honour with him in the old days, and renowned even as far as the court of the King of London. It was intolerable to the Crintach that he should hold back any longer. "The Demesians grow impatient of the breaking of laws and precedents," said he. "Let the treaty be kept from this time forward. It is unfitting that a woman should be throned at the feast times." "Let it be kept, and evil fall upon it," said Pendaran. "If Ceredig Calcum Teivi were here, ye should be hindered. As for me, I have no fortitude left wherewith to oppose ye, on account of being plagued by sea mists." Meirig Muin and the Lord of Aberdaugledai marvelled at the compliance of Pendaran. "Lord Pendaran," said Meirig, "old age is oppressing you." "Truly it is oppressing me," said Pendaran. "On account of it I cannot hear of fallings into the sea without petulant impatience and a desire for revenge upon the sea mists. By the war shout and high Aton of the gods, I would shoot until there were no mists left along the sea border, were it not that the Queen forbade me." While he was speaking, Dainiol Drug came into the council hall. "What talk is this of queenhood?" said he. "According to the treaty there is neither king nor queen in Dyfed." "That is true," said the Crintach. "The treaty shall be kept from this out. Let no man speak of the queen in this council." Pendaran took his bow lightly and fitted an arrow to it without pomp or ostentation. "I am growing old," said he. "Miserably fitful is my memory. It was but the daughter of Hevaith forbade me. I had forgotten that she forfeited her sovereignty." No sooner was sovereignty out from between his teeth than he was on his feet, dominant, a warlike hero intensely to be feared. His right hand with the bowstring was at his shoulder. The point of the shaft would take Dainiol between the eyes were the string loosed, and thereafter would pass through his head and through the wall of the council chamber.
By heaven, I never will refrain from shooting, except upon command of a lawful sovereign. The fickle rashness of my old age is too much for me." Confusion took the four of them in a moment, and Dainiol more than any of them. "The Queen ordered thee not to shoot," said he, and trembling with the fear of death as he said it. "The Queen?" said Pendarren. "What talk is this of queenhood in the name of heaven? Was there no treaty? Was there no forfeiting queenhood? There is no sovereign in Arberth, and no one with a right to command me. And there are 3 arrows in the quiver, and 1 upon the string, that I shall shoot, to prove that ye are but sea mists enchanted in the guise of men. It is evil to take advantage of my old age and infirmities, and to seek to deceive me because my wits are failing." "Shoot not on account of the Queen's forbidding thee," said Madog. "Rhianon fer Hefaith is a queen." In that way the sovereignty of Rhiannon was maintained that year also. Gwydion ap Don, in the form of a dragon, took the news to Ceredig Call in the Gwerdonau Cleon, and he and Arth Kennan, and as many of the Tyli of Pŵl Pen Annan as were there, made merry over it, and over Pendarren's infirmities between dawn and sunset during 3 days. "Less well should I have served her had I remained alive," said Ceredig. In the 15th year it happened that Mairig Muin was in his house at Bronwydd, and as they were sitting down to the feast, a messenger came into the hall from Rhiannon with news that there was need of the chieftain at Arberth. "Yes," said Mairig, "I will ride forth tomorrow when it dawns." "It would be better to ride now," said the messenger. "Often the unprompt will be overtaken by misfortune." Said Mairig, "For what labour will the need of me be?" "For the watching on Gorseth Arberth," said the messenger. "We will set forth at dawn," said Mairig, "and be at Arberth by mid-morning. Inhospitable it were truly that a prince should come to the hall and meet with no entertainment." "You are to choose," said Gwawl ap Clud, "but it would be better to set forth now." "Not so," said Mairig, "we will ride at dawn." That night the house of Mairig was burnt over his head, and he himself perished in the smoke, and Gwawl ap Clud powerless to save him. Gwawl gave the news to Rhiannon and the Pentyli. "There was a man lurking beyond the gate," said he, "that had the aspect of Gwylton Gwaithaf." Pendarren Dyfed mourned for the slaying of Mairig. Except Gwawl ap Clud, there was no one in Dyfed that he loved more. "The hospitality of the immortals was with him," said he. "I delighted in his conversation at all times, and in his generosity, and in his magnanimous bearing in the onslaught, and in the gay nature of him, and the regal songs and the laughter. Hateful to me above all things are these deaths by flame and suffocation." "Noble are the words spoken," said Rhiannon. "It would be unfitting to say less of him." Pendarren turned to her. "Sovereign Princess," said he, "do not deny me this. Unbounded is my desire to loose an arrow this day in the council. The anger of that Gwyltyn is of the nature of flame, and his deceits are darker and more treacherous than the smoke and fumes that destroy the sleeping." "If Gwyltyn were slain, there would be war," said she. "Unless Pŵl Pen Annan were here, or Pryderi fab Pŵl to lead you, there would be no advantage even in victory. Those two are of the kingly race, descendants of the gods and the Cymry. There are many that would support and follow them that will take no side now, and the Demetians will be weary of lacking their king by the time Pryderi returns. And return he will," said she, "and will have need of you. But now you would destroy these men and lay the land in ruin, and neither Pŵl nor Pryderi would have advantage from it." "We desire no advantage for anyone but you," said he. "It is the sorrow of our lives that you should do the penance." "I am content with waiting and patience," said she. "This fate I foresaw. I pray you to be content with waiting also." "Old and fierce and hasty am I grown," said Pendarren. "Fiercely I desire to loose this arrow, and 3 more after it, but I am not without knowledge what is your due." He went into the council, and as he went, fell to his considering and cogitations. "They shall acknowledge her queenhood this year also," thought he. "Mairig Muin would not grudge the price of it." Pendarren rose up in the council hall.
but for the orders I have received from the Queen, the daughter of Hevaith Hen in the kingdom of the Immortals, the sovereign ruler of the Demesians, your lady and mine, and the lineage of the gods with her, and herself a goddess." Slowly and haughtily, with defiant menace, the words rolled out from between his teeth and lips. "You shall not speak of her thus," cried Gwilton Gwaithaf Ol. "Unbearable is this. By the son of the Three Shouts, were it not for the orders I had from her, I would quench certain fires with this arrow." The point of it was aimed between the eyes of Gwiltin. There was no one worse than he between the sea and the Tui and the Teivi, and therefore he was called Gwaithaf Ol. "Shoot not! The Queen ordered thee," said Gwiltin, trembling. "Not so. It was Rhiannon ordered me." "She is the Queen." "I will show thee," said Pendarren, and lowered his aim. He loosed the arrow, and it took the two folds of the mantle of Gwilton between his right arm and his ribs, pinned him by the mantle to the wall. Before the arrow struck, another was fitted to the bow. "I will show thee again," said Pendarren, and loosed it. It took the folds of his mantle between the left arm and the heart, and pinned him to the wall on that side also. The third arrow was aimed before the second struck. "Who is the Queen?" said Pendarren Dyfed. "Rhiannon is the Queen," said Gwilton. "Ever I loved formalities," said Pendarren. "Appease you my irritable nature now out of courtesy by speaking according to her dignity and your own unworthiness. Let your words be, the Queen, Rhiannon Wren, the daughter of Hevaith, from the land of the Immortals." "The Queen, Rhiannon Wren, the daughter of Hevaith in the land of the Immortals," said Gwilton. "The sovereign ruler of the Demesians, your lady and mine, and the lineage of the gods with her, and herself clearly a goddess. Speak you the words as they are given you," said Pendarren. Gwiltin repeated the words. "Madog and Catog and Dainiel, to your feet with you, and repeat the titles of your lady and mine," said Pendarren. The fear of his swift bow was upon them, with his not ceasing to menace them with it, and they rose up and repeated the titles. "That is well," said Pendarren. "It is delightful to me that the rash impetuosity of my nature should have been appeased, without committing violence and ill-considered action. You see how it is with me," he said. "I am grown old and hasty, and am troubled with forgetfulness, and am fickly rash. When any of the servants of the Queen meet their death by treachery, I am filled with the burning desire to shoot, and this desire takes me whenever I come into the council, and it is needful that you should constantly remind me who it is that has ordered me to restrain the arrows. And beyond that," said he, "it has been revealed to me that should another of us be slain, I shall fall short of restraining them and forget the orders of the Queen and shoot in this council, and that vehemently and without warning, and that the one I shall shoot at will be the Crintach himself, and heaven knows, if I did that, it might well be the cause of pining away and distaste of food with me." So Rhiannon had her queenhood acknowledged, what there was of it, after doing penance from dawn to dusk for that year also. As for Meirig Muin of Bronwydd, when the news was given to him in the Gwerddonau Cleon, there was no controlling his delight and laughter on account of the arrows and impatience of Pendarren, and of the infirmities of his old age. It happened in the 18th year that there was a raid of giants at Aberdai Gleddai from beyond the raging sea. Few would go against them, except the men of the Tyli of Pwyl Penannon. 30 remained to guard the Queen at Arberth, and 30 went against the giants. They obtained the victory, such as it was, and destroyed the host that opposed them, but 20 of them were slain, and 5 so deeply wounded that neither physician nor cauldron of cure could heal them. On the eve of May, Rhiannon sent 10 men to guard the Gorsedd, so that there were no more than 25 left at Arberth that night. The men of the Crintach had become more impatient than ever by that time. They had determined that on the eve of May, when the Tyli was at its fewest, their lord should take the throne at the feast. Pendarren Dyfed came into the hall early. He took the place of the King's heir opposite to the dais. 14 of his companions were with him. The rest would lead the Queen from the gate, when she might leave it at sunset. Madog came in at the head of his men. They did not take their places about the table as would have befitted them, but went forward towards the throne. Pendarren waited until they were on the dais. Then he was on his feet and his bow drawn and aimed. It had not its equal in Dyfed, either for swift suddenness or for driving power, or for sureness of aim, nor in the whole of the Island of the Mighty, as was well known, nor in the rest of the world. "Woe is me!" cried Pendarren. "Old and rash and full of whims have I grown. I am seized with an intolerable desire to drive shafts through the back of yonder chair." Madog turned and saw him, and stepped aside quickly from the throne. "Fickly rash are the desires of old age," cried Pendarren again. "Bear you with me in all courtesy and consideration, and it shall be the better. It was revealed to me in dreams during the night that I should be speeding arrows senselessly at the dais throughout the feast time, unless there were one from the kingdom of the immortals upon the throne." His voice was like the roaring of the flood among the mountains. His aspect was that of a breaker of battles, a driver of thousands into the wave. There was no one in the hall that would have dared to oppose him. In that way he preserved the queenhood of Rhianon during the 20 years. There were many that plotted to destroy him, but he was wise continually, and went nowhere but where Rhiannon might have counselled him to go, and did nothing but what was service for her. With that, and with the ready swift terror of his bow, it was as if there were unseen dragons of protection encircling him. There was no one that dared come against him openly, and no one that could obtain success or advantage against him in secret. End of Part 24. Part 25 of The Fates of the Princes of Dyfed by Kenneth Morris. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Story of Rhiannon and Pryderi, or the Book of the Three Unusual Arts of Pryderi fab Pwyll. The third branch of it, that is to say, the Return of Pryderi. 3. The Coming of Pryderi. The 21 years of the penance of Rhiannon were at their end, and 2 months after it. By that time there were no more than 30 left to maintain the sovereignty of their queen, Pendarren Dyfed and Gwawl ap Clud, and 28 of the Taili of Pwyll Penannon with them. From the eve of May onward, she had let no day pass without 10 of them guarding the gorsedd from noon until sunset. Glanach and Clonach and Mwynach, her 3 birds, had returned to her. She had not kept them to take delight in their singing, but had sent them questing over the world after her lord, the son of the Boundless, that had been Pwyll Penannon before the falling of the sorrow of the Demetians. She had made known to the men of the Taili that the birds had returned, and that it would mean the coming of Pwyll or Pryderi. And indeed, great was the need on them for good tidings, with their having grown so few and old, and their enemies waxing stronger and more insolent around them always. Here is what happened to them at last. They were leading her into the hall for the feast, Pendarren on her right and Gwawl ap Clud on her left, and she leaning on their arms, dependent on them. 18 men followed these 3. As they came in, they saw what had befallen. The place was filled with 500 of the men of Madog, and the Crintach himself was on the throne. 500 bows were strung, and 500 arrows aimed at Rhiannon. Even if Pendarren had had his arms free for shooting, the queen would have been slain before his bowstring could have obtained its stretching. Madog Crintach laughed. "Pendarren Dyfed," said he, 500 are the shafts that are aimed. Is there curbing your petulance in it? Is your rash impatience quenched?" Pendarren moved forward between the arrows and Rhiannon. "Their bows are aimed," he whispered to her. "There is no resisting them now. What answer will I give him?" She laughed quietly. "A peaceful answer," said she. "Give him a peaceful answer. Say that he has won,
and may go to his feasting. Say that we will go into exile in Ireland if it please him. He will not slay us here, but will make pursuit of us secretly."
"Indeed, my impatience is quenched, good soul," said Pendarren. "Never had I a greater desire for peace than now. The aged long for quietness. Take you the throne of the Demetians. As for us, if it please you, we will go into exile in Ireland."
Then said Rhiannon, "Lord Madog, I shall come again to oppose you, and it will be with Pwyll Penannon, or with Pryderi fab Pwyll."
Uproariously they laughed in mockery at that, the whole 500 of them, and Madog their lord. "Were it not for pity, ye should be slain," said he. "Ye are given until the morning to leave Dyfed."
"Lord Madog," whispered Gwilthin to him, "it would be better to slay them before they can take ship at Aberdaugleddau."
"That is true," said Madog, whispering again. "Men shall go in pursuit of them and slay them secretly." The 20 turned sadly and led their queen out from the hall. They came into the courtyard without speaking. "The ruin of Dyfed is this," said Pendarren. "There is no more hope for it henceforward. Without fighting it would have been hard for the 30 of us to have resisted them further. An evil fate is this."
"Not so," said Rhiannon. "Fortunate are you truly. The immortals will have heard of your service. Not one of you will be without his reward."
"By the shield of Hugh Gadarn, let there be no talk of reward," said Pendarren. "To have served you has been a better reward than was given to anyone before. Less than human should we be if we desired rewards beyond this."
The 18 old men sighed. None of their keen, fierce, aged eyes but had the tears in them.
"That is true," said they. "We will have no rewards. Alas, that we are alive, to behold you bereft of sovereignty. Go back to your immortality. This world is too evil for you," said Pendarren. "Be it granted to us to know that you are among your own dragon kin, and we will take what reward we desire. We are old men that love you," said he. "Grant us the sight of the wings that shall carry you to the house of Hugh Gadarn. After that, our own hands will take what our hearts desire."
The 18 nodded. Their old eyes fell, or were set, shining for far vision.
"Indeed, we could take it then," said they.
"It is known to me what you would take." With that she turned to Gwawl ap Clud. "Lord Gwawl," she said, "is it your will to return to your own land?"
"It is not," said he. "I desire new lives in the Island of the Mighty. My fate will be one with theirs. Call you upon the dragon chariots. We are not able to serve you further."
They were standing beneath the apple tree in the courtyard under the moon. She lifted her face. Although sightless, she saw what was not made known to any of them. She was aware of flaming mists, green and golden, that leapt and streamed over the firmament. They drew nearer, and took the form of a dragon that circled in the air above the Demetians, and lighted down at last in the limbs of the tree. "It is given you now to behold an immortal," said Rhiannon. "It is given you to hear the conversation of Gwydion, the son of Don." They looked up, and the tree was one white flame and intense glory above them, and there, in the midst of it, was Gwydion ap Don in his bardic guise, the most beautiful youth in the world. "It is now that you will come to the Wyddfa, daughter of Hefaith," said he. "Hugh the Mighty is enthroned there awaiting you. The knife is in the meat and the mead is in the horn, and there will be revelry in the hall of the gods when the best of their race is made one with them. Every night during these 21 years it has been offered to you. You will not refuse it now. The dragon wings are made ready. Come you with me now to the ones that await you." Proud and gentle was the laughter of Rhiannon Wren. "Ah, dear," she said, "gods and men you are without understanding of this. Did you think that I had suffered defeat?" The light waned from the tree, and Gwydion was gone. They went on towards the outer gate. Before they came to it, a sound of knocking arose from without. "Is there a porter?" cried the one that knocked. "There is not," said Pendarren Dyfed.
There is revelry in the court of Mabinogion. The porters will be feasting with their lord. The greeting of heaven and man to the one that made answer. Open the portal if it please you. It is better for a good man not to enter the house of the wicked, said Pendarren. Who is it that desires to come in? A craftsman bearing his craft. What craft? 3 unusual crafts, and the first of them, restoring youth to the aged. Madog the Crintach would be better without it. Not well would it be for you to come in here. The second is restoring sight to the sightless. Shall I open it? He asked Rhiannon. Let him make known the third craft first, said she. The Crintach would be better with less sight than he has, said Pendarren. What will the third craft be? Oh, chieftain, it is not on the Crintach that I shall exercise my crafts. As for the third, it will be restoring thrones to their rightful owners, said Gurry Gwalt Eirene. Open thou the portal, dear soul, said Rhiannon. He opened it, and Gurry dismounted at the horse block and came in. As soon as he saw Rhiannon, he kneeled down at her feet. Lady, said he, is it your will that I make known to you the manner of exercising the first of the arts? It is my will, she said. He rose up and took the fillet and fastened it about her white hair, as Gurron Briffarth had directed him. By the wood, the field, and the mountain, he said, quit whiteness every hair of you, and assume your natural colour. Let black be black, and the brown brown, and the golden golden, and let the limbs regain their youth, as if years had never passed over them. She stood there, as young and glorious of aspect as she had been when Pwyll first saw her riding through the valley of the Gorsedd. Her rightful immortality kindled in all her limbs. The years are undone, and the sorrow with them, said Rhiannon. This also was foreknown. Do you deem now that I have suffered defeat? This is a marvel, said the 20 of them. Praised and honoured be this young man beyond all the youths of the world. Lady, said Gurry Gwalt Eirene, is it your will that I make the second art known? It is my will, dear, said she. He put the ring on the forefinger of his right hand and lifted it to her right eyelid, as Pleneth the sight-giver had directed him. By the wood, the field, and the mountain, quit you your blindness, said he. Then he touched the left eyelid and said to it, By the wood, the field, and the mountain, quit you your blindness also. And then, the vision of God, the dragon, and the eagle to the 2 of you from this out. Rhiannon turned to the 20. Souls, souls, said she, excellent and delightful to me is it to behold you. There were 2 eyes with them that were shedding the tears of joy and delight. Do you deem now that I have suffered defeat? Said she. As for you, dear, she said, turning to Gurry again, am I made known to you now, as clearly as you were made known to me from the moment I heard you knocking on the portal? He was at her feet again, his arms compassing her knees. Indeed, yes, dear, she said, raising him. You are my own son, Pryderi. By heaven, said Pendarren Dyfed, it is Pwyll Penannan's son. They heard hoofbeats on the road near by, and the voice of the Lord of Aberdaugleddau. Come, said Pendarren quietly, we will meet them on the road with the tidings. They stole forth through the gate and met the 10 from Gorsedd Arberth. Said Pendarren Dyfed, Is there any news with you from Gorsedd Arberth? We saw a youth riding by through the twilight, and half of us said that he would be Pwyll Penannan, and half of us held that he would be one of the immortals, said the Lord of Aberdaugleddau. Is there any news from the hall? There is, said Pendarren. Madog Crintach is enthroned there. The sorrow has fallen at last, said the 10. Never was there misery to equal this. There never was joy to equal it, said Pendarren Dyfed. Come you into the courtyard. They went in, and beheld Pryderi and Rhiannon. By heaven, said the Lord of Aberdaugleddau, it is Pwyll Penannan's son. The 29 old men, the last of the best of the Demetians, and Gwawl ap Clud, that had not grown old and never would, came about Pryderi, eager to delight their eyes with his strength and his beauty, with the mean and regal bearing of Bwyll Pen Annwn that they beheld with him, eager for the touch of his hands. They remembered all the delights they had ever known during their lives. The best that they remembered seemed to them akin to sorrow, compared with the delight of beholding Pryderi fab Bwyll Pen Annwn. "Lord," said Penderyn Dyfed, "here is your taily. There will be barely 500 within the hall to give you the welcome of opposition. Is it permitted to us to storm the hall?"
"Souls, souls," said Rhiannon, "I will have you restored to the best of your manhood first."
She turned to Pryderi.
"Dear," she said, "there never were the equals of these Demetians. Set you the fillet about their foreheads, one after another of them. It was for this that I bound it about your swaddling clothes the moment you were born. Souls, souls," she said, "did you deem that I would desert you? Did you deem that the companionship of the immortals would be better to me than the companionship of such Cymry as you are?"
One by one, beginning with Penderyn Ben Taily, Pryderi put youth on them, until there were 30 warriors with him in the courtyard, and they all in the prime of their strength and youthful manhood, of their warlike beauty and glory and vigour. Penderyn Dyfed sighed.
"Dear soul," said Rhiannon, "what will be troubling you?"
"Inordinate desires," said Penderyn.
"What desires are they?"
said she. "I lament that I rejected that which was offered me. In spite of this young manhood, it is the fickle nature of the over-old that remains with me." "Speak you without concealment," said Pryderi. Then Penderyn said, "Heretofore I was Pentaily for Bwyll Pen Annwn thy father. During 21 years have I been Pentaily for the Queen. For her sake I have desired often to shoot. For her sake I have refrained from shooting. Sorrow upon me, I desire a reward for this." "Lord," said the 29, "the best of us will not compare with Penderyn." "What reward do you desire, dear soul?" Penderyn answered hesitatingly, and with the bashfulness of a young boy. "This," said he, "that I may make the way for my lord into the hall of his fathers. Delightful to my soul beyond all things would be this pleasant diversion. It is so long since I have made the bowstring sing." All this while they had heard the shouting and revelry from within the hall. Suddenly the door was flung open, and a flare of light came out to them.
"Stand in the shadow of the tree,"
said Rhiannon, and they did so.
"Forego you the reward for a little while, Penderyn dear," said she. "My son has 3 unusual arts with him, and if the truth were told, he has barely made one of them known to us yet. Go you forward into the hall, Pryderi," said she. "There are your 3 arts that must be exercised."
"Who is it that makes disturbance in the courtyard?" shouted the porter. "Let him be gone, whosoever he is. The knife is in the meat, and the mead is in the horn, and no one may enter." Pryderi fab Bwyll went forward towards the door. "Say you so indeed?" said he. "A craftsman bearing his craft may enter at any time." "Neither craftsman nor bard, neither king's son nor chieftain," said the porter. "It is a marvel to me that this should be spoken," said Pryderi. "Come you into the hall with me, that you may make it clearer by the light of the torches." He took the porter by the arm and led him into the hall. It was more dragging than leading, and neither good will nor silence with the one dragged. "Lord Madog," cried he, "here is one that hath entered by violence when the door was opened." "If he had no regard for usage, he ought to be slain," said Dainiel Drug. "Make an end of him quickly," said the Crintach. "We will have respect paid to the precedents of the court." 100 men rose up, eager for the diversion. When they saw Pryderi, they paused, although their swords were drawn and his sheathed. Pryderi laughed merrily. "As for usage and precedent," said he, "there will be regard paid to them everywhere except here. It is as if some upstart alien held court here, and no rightful king of the race of the Cymry." "What disregard of them is found here?" said Madog. He knew that he had never learned kinghood. "Disregard enough, and the greatest in the world," said Pryderi. "2 men may enter a court at any time, an institutional bard and the son of a king. 2 men may enter if there is need of them, a warrior bearing his arms and a craftsman bearing his craft. I am a bard and a king's son, yet entrance was refused me. I am a warrior of whom there is need, yet I was not made welcome. I am also a craftsman bearing his crafts, yet I was not asked concerning the nature of them. Unkinglike and uncourtly is this."
"Let a place be made for him next to the Penteili," said Madog.
It was his nature to be without hospitality, and therefore was he called the Crintach. No one had ever had generous kindliness from him. What he had he kept, and desired more. Now that kinghood had come to him, nothing would please him but to seem kingly. He desired to put on the bearing of the kings of the Cymry, lest it should be remembered that he was the son of a merchant from beyond the sea. He would accord honour to this guest, but it was fear and meanness that drove him to it. He would have the most splendid feast that had been given in Dyfed since the reign of Hugh Gadarn, but what seemed to him regal generosity was no better than gluttonous waste. There was triumph and delight in the hall that night, and consuming meat and mead without measure, but it was such feasting as would be hateful to heroes, and the songs sung would be the sorrow of bards. Pryderi took his place. Gwilting Gwaithaf was in the seat of the Penteili next to him. "The greeting of heaven and man to you, Pendaran Dyfed," said Pryderi, and obtained no answer from him. The feasting went forward. "Throughout these islands I have heard the renown of Pendaran Dyfed," said Pryderi. "This is a marvel to me." "What is a marvel to thee?" said Gwiltin. "That a man with such fame for valour and courtesy should practise ill manners towards a guest," said Pryderi. "Who practises ill manners?" said Gwiltin. "It is you that practise them, Pendaran," said Pryderi. "Ungreeted have I taken my place at your side. A cause of grief with me is this." "Insolent thou art," said Gwiltin. He rose to his feet and struck at Pryderi with his hand. "Insolent thou art, truly," said he. Pryderi rose up. "The Penteili of the court has given me blows and violence," said he. "According to precedent, it is a cause of fighting between him and me, and if I overcome him, I shall be the Penteili. It is the courtesy of kings' houses," said he. Gwiltin waited for nothing, but drew his sword and smote at Pryderi. Pryderi struck it out of his hand lightly, and it fell broken afar in the hall. "Forego you the office of Penteili," said he. "It will be the better for you." Gwiltin slunk away ashamed. He would have fought well enough, but for overmuch meat and mead. Pryderi took the place of the Penteili, and Madog called Gwiltin to him. "This can be righted in the morning," said Madog. "At the first feast there are the usages that must be considered." Then he said, "The victorious shall be Penteili. Keep you this office, whosoever you are. Let the feasting go forward. Let the household bards sing, that we may have peace here." As for who the household bard was, he was Dainiol the Wicked. There was no one better among them at bardism than he. Institutional bards of the holy Gorsedd of Ynys Brydain were not to be found in Dyfed at that time. This much may be said of Dainiol's singing: it was without the three necessities of bardic song. The best truth in it was a lie, and truth is well known to be the first necessity. It was framed more in rancour against the Queen and Pwyll Penannan and Pendaran Dyfed than in praise even of the Crintach, of whom, heaven knows, there was little to praise, either to be spoken or sung. The second necessity is that the noble shall be extolled and the small-souled and meagre left without mention. There was no sweet sound nor beauty with it. And the third necessity is that a bardic song shall be well framed and melodious, closely knit with sweet consonances and assonances, and no less agreeable to the ear than the music of the blackbird at dawn, or the whisper of the west wind among the reeds on the fairest evening in August, or the carolling of the mavis in the woods in May. Unless those necessities are observed, the immortal kindred cannot maintain their friendship with the bards. Neglect of them would have been the corruption of the whole virtue of the Island of the Mighty in those days. Pryderi rose to his feet. "Vile singing is this," he said pleasantly. He made his way to the dais, where Daniel stood. "Peace be with you all," said he. "I myself will show you singing. It is unfitting that the King's feast should be defiled by songs without truth, extolment, or assonance. Give me the harp, good soul, and I will make known to you the true method of bardic singing." Daniel stopped and stared at him. "By heaven," said he, "is this to be permitted? What insolent youth is here?" Pryderi laughed lightly and pleasantly. "A bard, such as it is," said he. "Go you down there, good soul, and I will show you singing." No one had the desire to hinder him, so regal was his mien, and so careless his laughter and cheerful audacity. He took the harp from Daniel, who went down slowly from the dais. With the first note that he struck, he put wonder and silence on everyone. Then he made these verses, and sang them. When darkness came down on the Lord of the West, and, bereft of renown, he went forth on his quest, when he wandered the world and was nameless, long years without joy, without rest, did you deem that he went and left after him none, that his life was all spent and your warfare all won? When ye dreamed of the passing of Pwyll, took ye thought for Pryderi his son? Madog started forward. "Pryderi!" he cried. "Where hast thou heard news of Pryderi fab Pwyll?" "Peace," said Pryderi. "Kings are silent when bards may be singing." Then he made these verses and sang them. When the Queen of the land was driven forth from her own, that the puny might stand on the steps of the throne, did ye deem there was none to redeem her? Did ye search betwixt Munwi and Mon? A little gold band from the regions of light, and a ring from her hand that had power over night, and a babe that was stolen from the cradle. Can ye fathom the riddle aright? Thrice dark was the world when they stole him away, to be hidden, to be hurled in the flame, in the spray. Save for one that was watching to save him, he should not have looked on the day. He multiplied the glory of his wheel upon them with the singing. They were enthralled, they were enspelled, they were enchanted. They did not move nor speak. Many of them remembered with yearning the splendour of the days of Pwyll Penannon. Little wonder in that, since unseen behind and over him on the dais stood one bodied in purple flame, even Alorn Brifarth Prydain, even the immortal ruler of song. By this ring that was found in the stall when they found me. He held up the ring of the family of Hevaith. They knew it for Rhianon's ring. It was as if carven out of sun stuff. It flashed lightnings of brilliance through the hall. By this small fillet bound, gold buckled around me. He held up the fillet. They trembled when they saw its beauty and magical nature, and remembered how of old it had shone about the hair of Rhiannon. Ye shall know me in anger and fear, ere the hands of my Druids have crowned me. Hath the saying been heard? Hath the fate been made known? Must I speak the brute word ere I come to mine own? That myself am Pryderi fab Pwyll, that should come, that should reign on his throne? Madog started up from the king's place. "Catug, Gwiltin, Daniel," he cried, "without conflict there will be no kinghood for us. It is the son of Pwyll." "Be silent as to that," cried Catug Gwaith. "Cowards obtain nothing. Everyone to his arms," he shouted. "The man hath a host of Gwyddelians about the city." They raised up their war shout, such as it was, and forced the Demetians to their arming. But for the enchantments of Abgil Coed, there were many who would not have armed against the son of Pwyll. But Pryderi strode towards the middle of the dais and towards Madog. "Quit thou the throne," said he. The Crintach drew sword and struck at him, and he lifted neither shield nor blade to meet the blow. But it seemed to Madog as if a great battle brand of flaming sapphire stuff flashed down from the rafters of the roof, swifter than the lightning and more beautiful, and met his own sword and shivered it into fragments in the midst of its falling. He looked up, and there was one standing over Pryderi that had the poplar stature with him, and the beauty of the dawn, and his body of golden flaming fire. He shrank back from the menace of Gurungawa, the heroic Pryffardd. ' Quit thou the throne when the King's son orders thee,' said Pryderi fab Pwyll, and Maddock slunk back into the shadows behind the throne. Then Pryderi took his place before the throne and watched those who were arming against him in the hall. ' There may be peace here yet,' he said. ' It is permitted to the Crintach and the 3 that are with him to leave Dyfed this night. The rest shall have peace and pardon if they desire it.' ' So shall it never be permitted to you, and you shall have neither pardon nor peace,' cried Catug. He and Gwiltin and Dainiol were well armed by that time. They were going about among the Demetians, ordering and inciting them. It was as if they prepared for battle with a host, not for the slaying of one man. They knew that that one was Pryderi fab Pwyll. The 3 of them were powerful men, accustomed to conflict, but they would have their whole host about them armed before they would give battle to the son of Pwyll Penannon. They overthrew the tables of the feasting, and dragged them to the walls for the sake of war space. Pryderi stood and watched them proudly. Catug raised his war shout. 500 of them raised it after him. Shouting, they rushed forward. When their rush was at its beginning, an arrow sped out from the back of the hall behind them, and passed Pryderi between his right arm and his ribs. It appeared to them that it would have been one among themselves that had shot, and that their enemy would have been already wounded if not slain. But it was not Pryderi that moved or trembled because of the arrow, nor that groaned when it struck, nor that ceased then from nefarious projects, and from stealing upon men from behind, and from plotting treacherous dagger blows, repugnant to the warlike and the courteous, nor that fell where he was lurking and creeping behind the throne. ' Evil upon the arrow !' groaned Madog Crintach. ' A miserable death is this !' They heard him, and paused in the first of their rush, shaken by indecision. But Catug and his companions leapt forward, shouting them on. Dainiol and he were at the foot of the dais. Pryderi stood before the throne unshaken, his sword undrawn, his shield at his back. The points of their spears were a hand's length from his breast. 2 arrows sped out of the far end of the hall. Catug fell for the first, and Dainiol for the second, at the very feet of the son of Pwyll. The 3rd arrow flew, and Gwiltin Gwaithaf fell upon his brethren. There was no remaining in doubt as to who might be the speeder of those arrows. The men in the hall hesitated. There rose up from behind them a regal, triumphant shouting of war shouts, a war shout that they remembered of old, and a war shout that was new to them. ' For the sake of Pwyll Penannon !' and ' For the sake of Pryderi fab Pwyll !' They turned. They saw there 30 men under Penderyn Dyfed, who had been old men when the feast began, but were now in the glory of their vigour and manhood, terrible of mien and aspect. There was the bow of Penderyn to consider, and how the shafts would come from it if he had a mind to send them, swifter than the driving of hail before the north wind in January, when the blasts of winter are at their fiercest. Penderyn laughed. ' I shall never restrain the rash passions of my age,' he cried. ' I have no more power over the arrows.' It seemed to them all that shafts from him were raining about them continually. No man dared to move because of them. ' Evil upon the bowstring that I cannot keep from speeding them ! Evil upon my right hand that will for ever be drawing the string !' He shot and laughed and shot. ' Old age is a curse,' he cried. ' Let none of ye desire it. Full it is of whims unrestrainable.' The arrows took the sword blades in their hands and split them lengthwise. They shaved off the hair from their lips without grazing the skin. ' I have destroyed the Crintach. I have destroyed Dainiol Drug and Catug Gwaith and Gwiltin Gwaithaf Ol. Yet still the bowstring twangs and sings. Woe is me ! It may well be that I shall pine away on account of this.' So he put confusion and terror upon them all, without slaying or so much as wounding one of them. His shooting was unlike the shooting of a mortal. Not one of them, but it seemed to him that arrows were grazing him at every moment. The men of the Taili of Pwyll Penannon put their mantles over their faces and rocked with laughter silently. Pryderi took his place on the throne and watched them. It was marvellous that he could keep from laughter. To him and to Rhianon was revealed what it was given to no one else to see. They saw the flame form that leaned over Pendarren from behind and rained the arrows upon the string of his bow more swiftly than the wave foam is driven by the tempests of November. They saw the glory of Plenoth Bryfarth Prydain. "Let a passage be cleared through the midst of ye," roared Pendarren. "For the sake of my peace, let it be cleared. I shall not be able to refrain from driving arrows along the middle of the hall, such a storm of them as will sweep it clean. Get to the walls if ye love your peace and mine." They obeyed him hastily. Then Rhiannon Wren went forward, passing through the middle of the hall towards the dais. "Ah, peace now, Pendarren Penteili," said she. The bowstring ceased its twanging, the arrows their flight. The Demetians marvelled when they saw her without blemish of old age or blindness, more beautiful than ever she had been. Pryderi came down from the dais and led her to the throne. She took her place on the throne of the Princes of Dyfed. "Indeed, indeed," thought Pendarren, "it was a marvel even to me was that shooting. Never have I had pleasure out of bowstrings until now." Then Pryderi spoke to the Demetians that had followed Madog. "It is permitted to you all to leave this land," said he. "You shall ride towards Morgannwg this night, and Pendarren Dyfed behind you, with his bow strung for protection." One of them stood forth. "I will not leave Dyfed," said he. "I served my lord Pwyll Penannon of old, and he never had cause to complain of me. I will not leave Dyfed now that Pryderi fab Pwyll is here. If you are unwilling that I should be your man, order Pendarren to shoot." 5 of them took their places behind him, then 10 more, then 100. "We have been under evil," said they. "An evil compulsion was put upon our minds. We will not leave Dyfed and the true king on the throne." "Evil upon me if there is any king here," said Pryderi. "Evil upon me if I will have one man to follow me. Rhiannon Wren, my mother, is the queen. There is no sovereignty here except with her." They bowed their heads. They covered their faces with their mantles. "It is made known to us now," said the first of them, "how she has been made to suffer because of us. It would be impossible for her to take service from such as we are." In silence the tears fell from their eyes. They remembered the good they had had from Rhiannon. They remembered her wisdom and kindness. The thought of her long sorrow was a greater sorrow to them than they had ever known. "Lady," said they, "order Pendarren to shoot." But Pendarren's bow was unstrung, and he was hanging it on the wall behind the chair of the Penteili, where it had not hung since Pwyll Penannon's time. "Not so," said Rhiannon. "Pendarren Penteili will shoot at my enemies, not at the men of my own Taili, not at the men who are my own well-loved friends." With that the hall was suddenly filled with light and music. 3 bright jewels of song fluttered among the rafters, more light-giving than the moon of heaven. A murmur of delight went through the Demetians. "They are the birds of Rhiannon," said Pendarren Dyfed. "They are Aden Llanach, Aden Lonach, and Aden Fuinach," said Pryderi. "They are the 3 beautiful singers of peace." While they sang, all mournfulness departed from the Demetians. It was to everyone as if the whole evil of his life had gone from him. For an hour they flashed and sang there, then went forth again in quest of Pwyll Penannon. With their going forth from the hall, the story of Rhiannon and Pryderi ends. On account of its relating by what means Pryderi accomplished the setting the birds free and overthrowing the men of Madog Crintach, it is often called the Book of the 3 Unusual Arts of Pryderi. End of Part 25. End of The Fates of the Princes of Dyfed by Kenneth Morris. Read by Phil Benson in Sydney, Australia.